Tēnā koutou katoa, haere ki tēnei hui, te iwi o rangatānei, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Welcome everybody to Arts, Culture and Heritage for the 17th of November. This meeting is being recorded and will be live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel, and our meeting is being run under Alert Level 2. So we have the usual scanning in arrangements before entering the chamber, and social distancing is required, trying to stay at least 1 metre apart while we're moving around this part of the building. The health and safety requirements for the building are shown on the screen, but as everybody in the room is used to being in this space, we'll take those as read. We have a number of participants online today, including Councillor Karen Naylor, who's joining remotely as allowed. So if councillors online, use the hands up function if you wish to speak, and cast your vote in the chat box. Everybody, I will call on you to speak. Elected members, I'll definitely be calling on you to speak, so your name will have been announced to people watching online. But for presenters and officers commenting, if you would give your name before you speak, that would be very helpful to those following remotely. For those in the room, can I please ask you to ensure your device is on silent? Okay. So I wasn't plugged in. Good. We'll move first to the apologies for this meeting. We do have a few. Council resolved that the apologies be received from Councillor Orfeh Michelad and Councillor Susan Beattie, Lou Finlay and Leonie Harpeter for early departure. I will move that, seconded by Councillor Barrett. You're on the list, Councillor Finlay. It is sometimes hard for people to see the screens when they're in the back rows, so I will read out the notices as we go. We're having some technical issues. Do we need to reinsert our... Okay, I think we should be good to vote. No, one more. How are we feeling? We good now? Okay, so I'll ask you to vote on that recommendation to receive the apologies, please. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 2 is notification of additional items, and I haven't any. Item 3, declarations of interest. Again, not advised of any. So moving to 4, which is public comment. I am expecting a public comment from Margaret Tennant, but we're advised she is not online at the moment. And so we might come back to that one when we resolve those issues. That was public comment on the matter of the old post office building, which is not an agenda issue, but one which I had accepted under my chair's discretion as a matter of public interest. So we'll come back to that if we can find her in the ether. So we will move to our presentation section of the meeting, and I'm delighted that we're joined today by 2 groups bringing presentations, and our first is a presentation from Creative New Zealand, who are online. Presentation by Cara Patterson and Richard Thompson. So, if we can find them. There we are. So we have 10 minutes for a presentation, and then we'll open to the floor for questions. Thank you for making time to be with us today. It's one of the benefits of our newly internet-enabled world, that we can bring in presentations from around the country without requiring people to travel. So thank you for your time, and we would love to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Kia ora koutou katoa, kia ora Councillor Bowen and councillors. Thank you for inviting us to join you at today's meeting. It's a real pleasure to be here to talk through New Zealanders in the Arts Palmerston North report. We are a little bit worried about the 10 minutes, so we're going to do a very brief introduction. Ko Kara Patterson toko ingoa. I had the pleasure and privilege of joining the Creative New Zealand advocacy team in June this year, so I'm still quite new. I've come from a local government background where I spent 2 decades working with the arts community and council at the Dunedin City Council as an arts advisor. And my new role at Creative New Zealand is focused on engagement with local government. So I'm really looking forward to working with you in this new space for me. I mean, we know that local government is a major funder of arts, culture and creativity in Aotearoa. Local authorities own much of the infrastructure in which arts take place, and you support arts access for local communities over a huge range of projects and investments. The work that you're doing here in Palmerston North is making a difference, and you can see this in the research data. We know that you already understand the powerful role arts, culture and creativity can play in our communities and how they drive community wellbeing. The good news is that communities understand this too, and our research is backing this up. Just a little bit of a highlight of who we are in terms of Creative New Zealand. We are a Crown entity. We are a national arts development agency. Our role is to encourage, promote and support the arts for all New Zealanders. And we do that through funding, through capability building, through our international program and through our team's mahi in advocacy. And we are also long-term partners of local government via the Creative Communities Scheme. Shout out to Gillian, who's in the audience, I think. I would like to sort of briefly introduce my colleague Richard Thompson from the policy team at CNZ. Richard is a researcher and the person responsible for pulling together these reports. He works directly with Colmar Brunton in shaping the questionnaire and all the finer details of how. This has been Richard's year, this work. So he will lead us through the presentation, and then we'll open for questions. So kia ora, thank you so much, and thank you, Richard.
Kia ora koutou. Welcome to this presentation on New Zealand and the arts. My name is Richard Thompson. I'll just talk briefly about the survey in general. It's a survey that's conducted every 3 years by Creative New Zealand. It's an online survey, and so there are a total of about 6,000 respondents, of which 200 were from Palmerston North, and these are the results from those 200. So with those numbers, there's a margin of error of about 7%. Now, move on. Let's move on to the next slide. This is a slide about attendance. It's attendance at a Creative New Zealand defined art form over the last 12 months. And those art forms are craft and object, literature, Ngā Toi Māori or Māori arts, Pacific arts, performing arts, and visual arts. So this survey is about those 6 particular art forms. And as you can see, there has been a slight decline in the attendance between 2017 and 2020. Obviously, we were in a COVID environment in 2020. Palmerston North was actually at alert level 1 during the survey period.
Excuse me, Richard, I don't mean to stop you mid-flow, but your screen hasn't moved on.
Oh, sorry. Does that work now?
No.
Here we go.
Okay, just move on. Sorry about that.
No.
Here we are on overall attendance.
So it's not moving on our screen here. Elected members, you have this presentation. It was emailed to you and I think is also on LG Hub if you want to have a look at that there. Sorry, Richard, back to you.
Okay, speaking to the second slide, overall attendance, there has been some decline, which of about 6 percentage points, not large given the size of the sample, but it is in line with what happened with New Zealand's presentation as well. Moving on to overall participation. Again, this held fairly steady, which was true for all of New Zealand. For some groups, participation actually went up last year in 2020, despite the COVID environment. Obviously, for others, it went down. Moving on to the next slide regarding change in the overall perception of the arts. This was an area of the survey where there was most sort of difference from 2017, where people were asked, had their view of the arts changed in the last 12 months? Obviously, for the majority of people in the grey, it hasn't, but the red said it had been, they were more positive about the arts, and those in the red said less so. The takeaway, the ratio from this is 4 to 1 for Palmerston North, so 12 versus 3 were more important. Then moving on to some more busier slides. This is about culture and identity and the attitudes that people had to a number of statements down the left-hand side. I'll just read a few of the statements, the top 3 out. That the arts should reflect New Zealand's cultural diversity. I learned about different cultures through the arts. The arts help define who we are as New Zealanders. And the arts are an important way of connecting with my culture. If we add the agree, strongly agree, and the agree together, they come to the numbers on the right-hand side. So generally there's sort of 60% of the people who are in that category of been agreeing with these statements. Moving on to the role of the arts in creating communities. Again, a number of statements were read out to, well, were available to the respondents, and they either agreed or disagreed. Again, the results on the right-hand side, the particular numbers show that the results are very much in line with New Zealand, very sort of similar results. So some of the questions were, it's important where I live is recognised as a place that supports excellence in the arts. Major art facilities are important and create a vibrant place. As you can see, pretty much in line with all New Zealand results. Just having problems with the navigation there, but we'll move on. Move on to the next slide. Attitudes towards the arts, accessibility and inclusiveness. This is an area where there is the most difference between the Palmerston North results and New Zealand results. And these were more positive than the New Zealand averages. I'll read the 3 main ones there, which is number 1, I am easily accessible to access the arts in my community. Number 3, my community has a broad range of arts and artistic activities I can experience. And number 5, young people have more opportunities to access affordable arts and experiences in my area. So a very positive result there in terms of accessibility and inclusiveness for the arts in Palmerston North. Moving on to the next slide. People were asked about the importance of the arts to their well-being. So how important is the arts to your personal well-being? Palmerston was slightly more polarised than the rest of New Zealand. You'll see a slightly larger green bar saying it's important and a slightly larger red saying it's unimportant, and a smaller grey bar in the middle. But again, broadly in line with the New Zealand results. The second half of the screen they were asked about how more or less important to your wellbeing with the arts since COVID has arrived. And again, broadly in line, but more people are saying with COVID that the arts are important to them, 25% in Palmerston North versus 9 who said it was less important. And just moving on to the last slide. This was a slide where people were asked to write in an open text box, so to write in sort of freehand how the arts improve society. And there were particular themes that came through: allows people to express themselves, brings people together, helps us understand other cultures and define our own. And while I've talked a lot about data, there are 200 real people behind this survey results. So I'll just read out some quotes that were made from Palmerston North residents about the arts in general. It's part of our identity. The arts have always contributed positively through the ages. Makes people more aware of the cultural diversity of this nation, and provides a positive outlet to those who are trying to express themselves. So that's a very quick run through New Zealanders in the arts. There's obviously a much larger slide pack of about 50 slides, which is available on the Creative New Zealand website and available to members. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Richard, and thank you, Cara, also, and for bearing with us as we sorted out the technical issues through that. So it was useful to have had that presentation available to pre-circulate to members. Thank you. And I will open for questions. To start, could you answer for me the 200 people who took the survey? Where did you get those 200 people from? Were they self-selected, or who were they?
The survey was conducted by Colmo Brunton, so they used their own online panel, which they have, which comes mainly through the Flybuys card, but it is a very large panel, and they also supplement that through another online panel company called Dynata, which is a large international company. So it's using online panels, which is the standard method.
So it's a statistically rigorous panel that provides that feedback?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I have a question from Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Cara and Richard, for this report. This increased positivity among New Zealanders all over, do you think it is due to the more time available during the COVID because people have more time to look into these things, or Creative New Zealand and the local associations have done really something big that has attracted more people thinking like this?
I think it's about people having some thought about what they really value. Obviously, in times where life is disrupted, you focus on what you do particularly value, and it came through strongly in the survey across all of New Zealand that people valued the benefits that the arts brought to them in terms of wellbeing and other areas.
Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Cara. Thank you, Richard. A couple questions, Richard. Just, I guess, trying to understand the survey depth sort of side of things. So how do we get to 200, and why don't we go further?
200 was a boosted sample by Palmerston North City Council, so there was some extra contribution from Palmerston North City Council, which boosted that number up to 200. It would have been less without that. And that was similar to 2 or 3 other cities which boosted their numbers to 200. So I mean, it was by boosting and getting extra results from Palmerston North.
Thank you. I guess just reflecting on the many diverse communities within the city here, and all sorts of demographic slices you could consider in a city of our nature. So at what level is this survey then representative? Is it snapshot city as a whole? Can we begin to gain insights in terms of different communities within, beyond what you've indicated here?
The survey is definitely robust in terms that it's matched to census data. In terms of the sample size, I mean, there is some commentary through the main report in terms of subgroups of difference by sort of age and gender mainly. I mean, a sample of 200, once you do, obviously, you know, divide it by gender, you've got 100 each. Age, again, you're getting down to smallish groups. So, you know, I would look broadly at the numbers rather than necessarily, you know, very hard, especially for subgroups. You are getting down to small numbers.
Thank you, Richard. And Cara, if I could perhaps ask finally, just in terms of how you're seeing councils make use of this information, perhaps some examples around the country of where these surveys are, in your view, being put to good use?
Good question. I think that, I mean, the information is really important when, in terms of your planning around the work that you want to do with communities. I mean, I think there's some big questions around access, and I think that you know, like, we know that there are challenges for artists around access to spaces, but also potentially for audiences in getting to spaces. And I know that that's something that your council is very keen on working with. I mean, I know you've been doing that work with the sort of kind of shared, the joint co-joining piece of work with some venues, which is a really great initiative. I think councils are generally looking at how they can match their planning with some of the statistics that are shining through.
Thank you both. Madam Chair.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up. What I'm taking from the feedback you've presented is that our Palmerston North data is broadly in line with the New Zealand national picture. I wondered if you'd been able to tell from that wider piece of research, who would be our comparators in that space? Who are we like most?
Yes, fairly difficult to answer off the top of my head there. I mean, we have divided the country into 12 regions, and you know, those are fairly large regions. There were about 6 cities similar to Palmerston North which boosted their data to enable a city report to be produced. So there's not a large number of cities that have comparable data to Palmerston North. So we appreciate Palmerston North boosting your sample and, you know, getting extra reports, but it's only matched by 5 other councils.
But my interest there is to look at cities who might be doing better in particular areas and to learn from their experience as to what's worked to give them better results. Is there a way that we might be able to pursue that?
I'm certainly happy to follow up and review the other city reports, definitely, yes.
Thank you. There are no further questions on your presentation, so thank you very much again for giving your time to speak to us this afternoon and for the work that you do. And thank you for recognising in your presentation the work that goes on locally here through our arts coordinator and our creative communities scheme locally, which I think has probably had a lot to do with how well we've come out in some of those responses. So thank you both for your time with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, and again, we just want to acknowledge all the great work that you are doing, and we really strongly encourage you to keep investing, and you know, where you can invest more. We know that it's a tough environment in terms of all the things that are potentially happening with the Future for Local Government review and the sort of the proposed reform of and change, but it's a really good opportunity, we think, to sort of like shine a light on your creative community and all the things that can happen through community wellbeing. So yeah, thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you, Cara. Thank you, Richard. Colleagues, the recommendation is that we receive the presentation for information, which I'm happy to move, seconded by Councillor Barrett, who's round the corner there. And I will open that for any comments. And the reason I asked Creative New Zealand to present their findings was to recognise that we asked for a more detailed report, and that will be useful in our planning going ahead in terms of our strategies and policies. And I think that it's pulled out some useful information even at that level. I think there's potential to go further in learning from that. I think, I was encouraged that we're broadly in line with the New Zealand data, and actually delighted to see that we come out well in terms of accessibility and inclusivity, because I think we know around that table that's something that we take really seriously, and we've invested in across all of our programmes, not just in arts, culture and heritage. That's something that's very important to us because it's important to our community. So it was great to see that coming through so strongly. One of the things that people say to me, and I'm sure to you, is that arts is a nice to have. And I think the point of us doing research like this is it shows that our community values it. It gives us evidence to rely on as to why we do invest into this space, that it matters to people and it matters to the quality of their lives here in our city. And it's one of the things that attracts people to live here and stay here. And so I think it's been a worthwhile exercise just for that, let alone the future benefits that we'll get from it. So if there are no further comments, I will ask you to vote to receive that presentation. Carried unanimously, thank you. I understand that Margaret Tennant is now online, so we're going to move back to item 4, which is to receive comment from members of the public on matters specified. And as previously stated, Margaret is speaking to us today about what I'm choosing to call the old post office building, although known in our community by many other names. So Margaret, thank you for giving your time to speak to us today. You're of course no stranger to our physical environment, but slightly different to have you online. And public comment is just 3 minutes and then questions after. So if I can hand over to you.
Okay, can I be heard first of all? Yes?
Yes.
Good. Just a few comments on the, I was going to say old post office building, but I'm not sure what the approved terminology is now, Rachel. Thank you, councillors, for allowing me to do this. Just a few comments on the history and why I think this is a particularly important building for the council to provide support in whatever way for. An Edwardian building built 1905, officially opened by Sir Joseph Ward 1906. Architect Joseph Charlesworth, who also designed the Wellington Town Hall and at least 16 other post office buildings around New Zealand. It's brick with a concrete render and built by local firm J. Trevor & Co. Half the money for it was raised by central government, and the rest, and I actually think this is quite important and a lot of people don't realise, was raised by the local community. Another important element for the time that you probably are familiar with was the chimes on the clock tower named after Rangatane chief Kere Te Panawa, removed 1942 after the Wairarapa earthquake, and now on the Hopwood clock tower. So the building itself, it's got a wider significance than its actual fabric. Especially as it's undertaken its passage in time, it's part of a wider social and geographical whole that I think we need to take account of. First of all, it's an important symbol of the role of government in the city, public employment, government functions, historically very important to the city economy and employment. This came up quite strongly when we worked on our book, City at the Centre. Site of some very fundamental city activities, most obviously communication, post, telegraph. Its counters took letters, sold stamps. but also because it was a savings bank, provided the means by which people saved for their future. More recently used for entertainment, and perhaps the social historian might add for some less salubrious activities like vandalism in the recent past. And it encapsulates the whole neoliberalism of the 1980s on, with the transformation of government functions played out in our landscape, and we see it very much with this building. Secondly, it's part of the wider context for the square Te Marae o Hine, itself now recognised as a significant site. The post office was one of the historical anchor points around Te Marae o Hine, and its commercial and administrative functions. We've got the Grand Hotel, really contemporary with the post office building, built 1906, the DIC a bit later, 1920s. Slightly beyond, but important because of their proximity to and visibility from Te Marae o Hine, All Saints completed 1914, and Ansett Tower 1938. So we've got these sort of, this kind of complex, I think, of historical significance together around the square area. But for me as a historian, I really think the post office building is valuable as part of what we call our memoryscape. It's a physical anchor point, but it's also part of people's experience and memories about Palmerston North. It adds variety to a city that risks external perceptions of being bland. Those of us who live in here know that's not the case, but we certainly found it came up when we were doing our research for the book. And this element of memoryscape is really, really important to places like Palmerston North. It attaches people to place, it's a linchpin of identity. Historians sometimes note that history is to the community as memory is to the individual. If individuals lose their memory, they lose their sense of identity, they lose the anchor of their being, they're left rudderless. So a society without an awareness of its own history and these historical triggers to memory may similarly be rudderless.
Margaret, that's 3 minutes up, I'm afraid. So I will open for questions, if that's okay. And I wanted to start I suppose I wondered if you had a view what it would mean to the city if we lost that building.
I think it's just one of that complex of key buildings, and I think it would be, it would just add to the sense of losing specialness, and we've already lost an awful lot of our historical buildings because many were built in brick, because we had the brick kilns around the city. So I think it would be quite a fundamental loss.
And I wanted to just circle back on a point you made, which I actually didn't know. You said, so can I clarify, you said half the money that paid for the original building was raised by the local community. How did that happen?
Apparently, I'm not sure why it happened, because it was a government building, but it was a very grand building for its time, and post offices did tend to be. So the local MP and the MP's wife led this fundraising effort, and I assume that wasn't totally unusual if you wanted a particularly grand building for your town at the time.
Well, that's very interesting. Okay. Thank you very much, Margaret. There's a question from Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Margaret, Professor Margaret. If Bill Gates says this building is yours, what would you do with this building?
Well, this is a building that's journeyed through time. It's already had different incarnations, I mean, mainly as a post office, but more recently, as we all know, for entertainment. I mean, personally, and I would love to see it used for a heritage purpose, but I guess we're not going to have Te Manawa shifted there. But there's no reason why it couldn't become used for something like housing or a shopping mall of a distinctive kind. As I say, I personally think a heritage use would be wonderful, but I guess there's other things going on that front.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. There are no further questions. Thanks again for giving us your time today and your renowned expertise in this subject area. Thank you. We'll move to receive the public comment, and I would also like to move an additional recommendation at this that links to this, recognising that we're restricted under the standing orders to what you can do with a public comment that's not on an agenda item. So with Councillor Barrett, we would like to also pass this public comment to the Chief Executive to urgently investigate if there's any role for Council in securing the future of the old Post Office building, including options to include it in Streets of People with a view towards transit hub and related uses, and report back to an elected member workshop or Council meeting as appropriate. To explain why I brought this forward now, I'm aware that there's long been talk about the future of this building, and it's not our building, it's in private ownership. However, this is a significant building for our community, and it also sits at a space in our streetscape where we're currently looking to invest millions of dollars in terms of our Streets for People programme. That piece of the square is the next cab off the rank, and in terms of our work towards a transit hub on that part of Main Street. It would seem to me that it would be a strange outcome if we invested millions of dollars into those two pieces of programmes without looking at the building that sits at the very heart of it. It might be that there isn't a role for Council in securing that future. It might be that that's not an appropriate thing for Council to be involved in, but until we ask the questions, we don't know. And I'm suggesting that could be reported back through Council or to a workshop, recognising there could be commercial sensitivities around this as a piece of work. And so I will open for any comments on either of the recommendations, and I'm happy to take any questions as the mover, if anybody has any on that. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mine is more by way of comment. Certainly happy to second this and ask colleagues for their support. I think this is a way to begin to reframe what is increasingly seen as a problem into thinking about it through the lens of opportunity, and those opportunities are the infrastructure works that we are committing to ensure the vitality of the city centre, possibly to have connections in to transport function. And it's actually interesting, reflecting on Professor Tennett's history of that building. Potentially the next phase does come full circle and brings at least some of that back into a public realm and public facing and public services role through transport. We don't yet know that. What we do know is that we have a building which is in the heart of our city, which is increasingly apparent that it is on the brink. And I think at those sort of times it is appropriate that a council begins to ask questions in a more structured and focused way about what future holds. And we're actually quite fortunate, given the synchrony of timing with our planned works in that area, to be able to look at those in parallel. So I would urge you to support on that basis, Madam Chair.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Mine's really just a question. I was just wondering if we could get a council officer's viewpoint on this, just in terms of, I just don't really want us to go tripping over our own feet.
Chief Planning Officer.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would probably end up being a workshop for the chairperson talked about potential commercial sensitivities. So one of the things, obviously council doesn't own the building, so its ability to influence the outcome is through support and through some of the programs that we have in the LTP to support these types of outcomes. So I guess the only other comment I would make is, council officers in undertaking their duty on a day-to-day basis become aware of proposals Some of those tend to be confidential for a good period of time. We are aware of interest post the most recent fire, which is a positive thing, and the offer of support that's been provided to the landowner or any potential future landowner has been relatively consistent for a period of time, which is support through our heritage funding, co-creation through design, Streets for People, the bus terminal, those types of things. So assisting with consenting and a smooth transition. So there's probably not much more I can share other than that at this point, but I think a workshop conversation could be useful, but there has been positive interest post the fire.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I do support this, but look, and I back up Mr. Murphy's comments that our influence, unless we own it, is rather limited. Although I can totally understand being left to the free market has left us with a horrible state we're in at the moment. I understand there is a sale and purchase agreement on the building at the moment, and there's some due diligence, and can't disclose who that is for obvious reasons, but let's just say I'm hopeful that we'll get a really, really good outcome for the city. But as Mr. Murphy said, you know, we're working with people as we can, and like the current owner or any future owners. But this possibly could feed into that, maybe. So yeah, I think it's a very much a watch and see at this stage.
Thank you. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not going to support this recommendation. This is the first I've seen it, so haven't had a proper chance to consider it. But my initial thoughts is that some of this wording is problematic for me. So the phrase "in securing the future of the building" seems to me code for buying, which I'm not interested in signalling any support for that option at present. In regards to the view towards the transit hub, again, I feel like that's predetermining the outcome of a privately owned building and its use. And I know that it says "and related uses," so that could be broader, but it still is putting on council's thoughts onto what it should be, which essentially would be, if this passes, giving some direction as to what our view for the use of the building should be, which I don't think is appropriate at this stage. Both the manager and the mayor have just given some broad context around the interest in the building at the moment, and I think that we have got a history of offering support. We have got funds available as outlined. Our support has not changed over the years. It remains the same. Council is committed to working with actually any building owner who is, advancing work on their building within this city centre, wanting to do development, those kind of things. We operate under a very open process of working with people. This decision, this recommendation in front of us isn't required to enable that. Those conversations happen already. And so at this stage, I think that it is meddling in something that doesn't need to be meddled in. Our support is already available. We have been very clear on that. The Mayor has been very vocal with interested parties around working with them. And I think that because there is interest at the moment, I think that we should just leave things and wait for that to progress. It's a privately owned building. It's not a public building at the moment.
Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to support this one, mainly because that building has been sitting there as an eyesore for so many years. There has been heaps of plans, I guess, that I've heard of people looking at it, potentially buying it, doing something with it, maybe not doing something with it. I've heard lots of murmurings over years, but at the moment, it is still a building that could have so much more potential. And I think the key thing with this recommendation is investigate if there is any role for council to secure the future of this building, including options, and look at reporting back to a workshop. I would like to know kind of what's going on with that space. That would be really helpful as an elected member, because I'm not in the discussions with the mayor and anybody else around what happens with this building. So I think it's entirely appropriate for us to to see if there are opportunities and to investigate if we can do anything about it. So I will support this.
Thank you. There are no further comments. I will... sorry, Councillor Dennison, you have appeared.
Sorry, the second time today. Sorry, I'm not sure why. Thank you, Madam Chair. My comments, a couple of things. One is, I guess probably I posed it as a question that Council did, in my recollection, explore the possibility of attaining that, and maybe a question directed to our planning officer, if you can recall, around a transit hub, keeping the facade and doing some other treatments for buses as a transit hub. Do you recall that work and how long ago that was?
8 years ago.
Yeah, there were some early concepts, probably a decade ago now, that had. It was probably more the car park and part of the rear of the adjoining car park and part of the rear of the building forming part of the bus terminal, urban bus terminal. Certainly at that time, some of the challenges were just, even though it's a large CBD site, once you start getting buses onto sites, manoeuvring them in and around on a site that size can be challenging. So the concepts approved as part of the City Centre Streetscape Plan had the terminal on Main Street, making use of the public road reserve rather than any private space. So that's the current live concept that's been endorsed by Council. And as part of the delivery of the Streetscape Plan, there will be further work and a business case in collaboration with Waka Kotahi to advance that design further. But certainly there has been conversations that potentially the Council could potentially there's been talk of possibly like a transport kiosk type thing within the building, so that it does form some connection with the bus terminal on Main Street, but the concepts we've done to date, more recently, don't utilise the building in any sort of substantial way for a terminal.
Thank you. And then to follow on with comment, I guess I posed that question because this is not a new idea. It's been explored around 10 years ago and decided that we wouldn't pursue it. As far as this coming up in this form, I'm not comfortable either, like the Deputy Mayor. I think the middle part of the recommendation where it starts to define what its intended use might be is too narrow. We should be, if it hasn't been included in our strategic planning to date, identifying a need, I think this is kind of like find the building and then we'll kind of create a need and then this gives a specific purpose. Very untidy for my mind. I won't support it in this form. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm checking that there are no more comments before I move to a right of reply. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues, for your comments on that. Since the fire, I suppose that's what triggered this for me. I've been, inundated might not be too strong a word, actually, by comments from our community about their concerns for this building because of its significance in our streetscape and its historical significance to many members of our community. And Councillor Dennison is of course right when he says this goes back quite a way, because I remember this as a conversation when I first stood for council. I seem to remember Councillor Dennison saying about the bus terminal, do it once and do it right. And his comment at that time was to do with this very building. And it concerns me greatly that 10 years later, we are no further forward and the building has gone significantly backwards. This is an earthquake-prone heritage building that is at very real risk of demolition by neglect. And we do not get a second chance on buildings like this. And from Margaret's commentary on our CBD streetscape, and from recent work done for Local History Week in our library, you can see the amount of buildings that we have lost to our central city. So I don't think it's a very big ask that the Chief Executive investigate if there's any role for council in this. In fact, I think our community expects it. So I would hope for your support in advancing this conversation. Thank you. Are we happy to take both of those elements together, or would people rather separate? That's to receive the presentation, the public comment, and the second recommendation. Separate, thank you. So we'll do to receive the public comment first. No, that's right. Oh, so Councillor Butt is moving that and I will second it. Well done, Councillor Butt. Carried unanimously. And then move to the second recommendation there, that the Chief Executive urgently investigate if there is any role for Council in securing the future of the old Post Office building, including options to include it in Streets for People with a view towards transit hub and related uses, reporting back to an elected member workshop or Council meeting as appropriate. We're waiting on one, if people could check their voting. Councillor Petrinas. That's carried 9 votes in favour, 6 votes against. Thank you. So to move back to our ordinary running of order of business, as per your agenda paper, we'll move to item 6, which is the presentation from Act 3 Productions. We have Alan Nagy online, I think. Thank you for bearing with us, Alan. I know you've been there since the beginning of the meeting.
No problem. Everyone can hear me there, nice and clear?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Cool. So firstly, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to present a little bit about our society and just a little bit of a cap up on where we are and where we're not. So as Councillor Bowen mentioned, my name's Alan Nagy. I'm on the board for Act 3 Productions. And I'm also the production manager for the society as well. So I have a little bit of a clip here for you to run through, which gives you a little bit of an insight of some of the stuff we've done and what we're looking at, and then I have a bit of narrative to go through, just explaining exactly, probably more focusing on the last couple of years of what's happened with the society. So I had a little bit of a chuckle to myself, and I'll show the presentation shortly, but the first clip that's actually on the video is a piece from 42nd Street, and it's We're in the Money, which is certainly not the case. So, yeah, so I've just been having a bit of a chuckle about that. But anyway, so hopefully we can get through the technology side of things, and I can share this with you, and we'll run this.
We haven't got sound here, Alan, I'm afraid.
Oh, sorry.
No, I think it's our technology, not yours. Don't worry about it.
It's just a audio track on top of it, so you're just missing a bit of music, that's all. Just give me 1 second while I get my rest of my act together here. Sorry that we didn't have the sound. It was just an audio track running in behind there. So Act 3 Productions, UNOS previously as Abbey Musical Theatre, and before that, the Palmerston North Operatic Society. We're 121 years old, or if you would prefer, in fact, old is probably the way the Society's feeling at the moment over the last couple of years. In April 2020, just as we were about to stage our Regent production of Sister Act, COVID-19 made an appearance in New Zealand. This was the start of the interruptions for many, including our Society. We were forced to cancel our April season of Sister Act, and the future of the Society was in jeopardy. Then came the fight back. With the assistance of the Regent on Broadway promotions and hours of voluntary work and perseverance, we managed to put the pieces back together again and restage Sister Act in August 2020. It was ironic that we were talking to the PNCC in an effort to raise funds to keep our Society's head above water, and one of their big questions was, are you trading as an insolvent? The answer to this was no. We still had $139 in the bank. However, the Regent on Broadway's promotions team had bankrolled us to the tune of $39,000. After 4 performances of our August season of Sister Act, we were once again thrown into a disarray and the resurgence of COVID-19, which thrust Palmerston North into alert level 2. At this time, the Society's production team presented to the Regent on Broadway board and staff a creative solution to our dilemma. This solution allowed us to return to the stage with a segregated audience of 400 people per performance, a solution that was adopted by many performance venues around New Zealand. This allowed us to recover the debt we had incurred previously from the production, and in fact it made us a couple of dollars. What a happy time this was. The Society went on to produce a successful season of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat in 2020, and in April 2021, a fabulous season of Chicago. Things were looking up. We'd secured a sponsor that was covering the cost of our lease. We managed to secure a few dollars in the bank, and things were looking good in general for our 2021 season of We Will Rock You, which had been moved from its original slot in August 2020 in the Regent to allow for us to restage Sister Act. You couldn't write this stuff. 4 nights into looking to what was to be a fantastic season of We Will Rock You, we were once again plunged into the uncertainty of COVID-19 lockdown. Once again, everything was put on hold. Borders were closed, and uncertainty prevailed on our lead performer, indeed, who was a Melbourne resident, and despite numerous plans, rescheduling, hopes, hours and hours of work, we had to abandon our season of We Will Rock You. Deja vu, anyone? The cancellation of the season resulted in a $110,000 loss for the Society. This was after some generous assistance and relief from some of our major creditors to the production. It would be remiss of me not to thank the Regent on Broadway team, Bounce NZ, Pixel Productions, and Image Group for their assistance and patience as some of our major creditors. The Society applied for and received assistance through the Council COVID Relief Fund, amounting to just over $15,000. We are sincerely thankful to the PNCC for this funding. We also launched a Give a Little page, which provided which proved what our Society means to the community, and it raised over $15,000. We are truly grateful for this also. These major funds, along with many other contributions, kept the Society solvent and has allowed us a continued existence. We are currently staging Legally Blonde as our end-of-year production with the generous assistance from CR Law, another organisation to whom we are extremely grateful. We are hoping that the 2022 has no more surprises for New Zealand as a whole and our Society. We have managed to negotiate with the Regent on Broadway team to secure a time slot in the February 2022 to restage We Will Rock You. This will take the format of 10 performances from Wednesday the 2nd of February through to Saturday the 12th of February 2022. Tickets are already on sale for this, and along with tickets transferred from our August 2021 season, we have already sold over 3,000 tickets. We Will Rock You will be performed, start again there. We Will Rock You will be followed by a season of the classic gospel story Godspell in April 2022, and then the Frankie Valli and Four Seasons Jersey Boys season towards the end of the year. The Society is not in a position to return to the Regent in 2022, other than the restaging of We Will Rock You. This is due to the threat of COVID-19 and the huge financial risk involved in staging these major productions in such a volatile time. It just puts our society at such a high risk of failure, basically, and 121 years history having to slide away. Once again, I'd like to thank the Council and the Regent on Broadway for their ongoing commitment and assistance to our society. We are a community organisation with a big heart, and this is reflected in our name. Act 3 Productions, He Whānau Tua Tini Tini, a family of many strands. I finish by inviting you all to attend Legally Blonde at the Wallace Development Company Theatre in a few weeks' time, and to the February 2022 restaging of We Will Rock You in the Regent on Broadway. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present to you.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you for that. And I will open to questions. I just wanted to start by just following up on that comment about not being able to go to the Regent next year. Can you just explain for us the difference between running something in your home theatre of Wallace Development Theatre and then running it in the Regent? How does that expose you?
For sure. So a budget is the big thing. It's always about money, unfortunately. For us to run a season in our own venue, probably costing us around about $100,000 to $150,000. Putting it into the Regent, anything between $250,000 and $400,000 to go there. It all revolves around advertising to get the bums on seats, to the overall cost of the actual staging itself, the sets and lighting, sound, etc., all so much bigger and so much more expensive to go into the Regent. And then, of course, there's the overall cost of the Regent itself, which, when you start racking all of those sort of things up, it means that if it fails, we're in a situation where it could be the demise of the society. If we fail at our own venue, we might end up with a $50,000 loss, which we could actually survive. Especially in the past, we could have survived $150,000 loss, like we just saw, $110,000 loss, like we've just sustained with We Will Rock You, will be the end of the society. We won't have the finances to cover that.
Okay. And Alan, you mentioned sponsorship from CR Law for Legally Blonde. Nice product tie in there, I thought. But you also mentioned sponsorship to cover your lease. Are you able to tell us who provided that support for you?
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I'm sitting there trying to rack my brain who it was.
That's a good problem to have. We can't remember who gave us money.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, because they've asked that they keep a low profile, so it was we sort of left it as that, and we haven't got it in any of our advertising.
That's fine. Honestly, we've had a history today of people saying things in public that they weren't supposed to say, so we won't push that one any further. Thank you for your time today, Alan. There aren't any further questions for you, so best wishes to you and to Act 3 for your season of Legally Blonde, and then into We Will Rock You in January, which I know isn't your normal slot, but looking forward to seeing that back on stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So the recommendation following that is that we receive the presentation for information, which I will move, seconded by Councillor Barrett. I'll open that for any comments. It's encouraging to me to see Act 3 still in existence at this stage. There was a very real risk earlier this year that it might all be too hard, but our COVID-19 relief fund has played a part in supporting them through this, and obviously there's been some commercial sponsorship come into the space, which goes to show the value that our community perceives in this. I'm concerned for the Regent that Act 3 won't be there next year. That's a big chunk of time out of their scheduling. Usually, well, pre-COVID, in the olden days, the Act 3 were looking at putting 2 shows on stage every year at the Regent, and that would be somewhere between 6 and 8 weeks that it would take into this. That's a big loss to the Regent and will have consequences for them, but it might be something they talk to us about later. But it's also a big loss for our hospitality sector in the central city. When Act 3 production stages one of their big shows at the Regent, they get big numbers coming through. That drives bars, restaurants, it drives associated people coming to visit the city, and we will lose that because they're running in a smaller venue outside the central city. So it's not without consequence for our arts sector, but more broadly for our city. And I'm concerned as we go forward that we continue to support Act 3 in the great work that they do. So I'll ask you to vote to receive that presentation, please. Carried unanimously, thank you. Moving on in the order of business, we're now looking to confirmation of minutes, and there are many, so we're going to take these together, you'll be pleased to hear. Yes, why are there so many, I hear you asking. It's complicated. We had an extraordinary meeting and that threw some things out, because extraordinary meetings don't receive minutes. So we have minutes from the Extraordinary Arts, Culture and Heritage Committee of the 13th of April, our ordinary meeting of the 14th of April, extraordinary 5th of May, and extraordinary 29th of September. And I will move that those be confirmed as a true and correct record. Are you seconding in that, Councillor Beattie? You want to separate them out? All of them? Okay. Righto. You'll have to go back to separating them. I think we'll separate all of them, please. I will move each of those individually, seconded by Councillor Dennison. And we'll just need a moment to separate out those.
On page 11, I was actually present at the April the 13th meeting, and I'm not showing.
We'll note that. So while we're separating those for purposes of people voting as they need to, are there any corrections or clarifications required following Councillor Beattie? Right. Are we okay to go on the first one?
Does prompt me with the vote count, so that would be on that section 9 votes to nil then, if that's the case. It's just interesting that it's all, the name doesn't appear at all.
Sorry, Councillor Denson, can you clarify what you're looking at, please?
Oh, we're talking about the meeting of the 13th.
Yes.
And Councillor Beattie's made mention that she was in attendance. Mm-hmm. I've just gone through scrolling the votes, which there is one just to receive those submissions, and it's not noted there either. So that would therefore mean that vote was passed 9 votes to nil. Mm-hmm. So that's why I was just querying.
All of them? We're going to, so the proposal is that we leave accepting those minutes so that the officers can check what's happened with Councillor Beattie's vote and come back and present a corrected version if necessary.
If it helps, I was on a Zoom meeting that time.
We will need to check. Thank you. Thank you for raising that. So we'll take the minutes for the meeting of the 13th off the table here and move to the 14th. and then following. And we're ready to go on the 14th minutes. Councillor Petrinas. Thank you.
Sorry, I was just having trouble seeing this one.
Councillor Finlay. Thank you. 11 in favour, 4 abstentions. The next one is 5th of May. Thank you. Which is another extraordinary meeting. In favour, thank you. And the last one for this meeting, the 29th of September. Carried unanimously, thank you. So the next item on the agenda, moving into our annual report section, we have all of our council-controlled organisations appearing remotely. And our first one, item 11, is Carchbirch Trust Board.
Kia ora, Madam Chair.
Kia ora, Grant. So there is a memo to Council which is in the name of Hannah, our Democracy and Governance Manager. We'll take that as read and hand over to you for any comments from the Trust Board.
So this I can say with a mixture of regret and relief. The last annual report from Acacia Birch Trust Board to be delivered by me and by the board. I recollect my predecessor expressing similar sentiments. I would like to have recorded an amicable and constructive collaboration with councillors and council staff during what have been unprecedented times. Sadly, that has not been the case, although the trust was always willing. But despite the absence of helpful concern from councillors and council staff, the record for the year shows that the property has been well managed and has achieved those key performance measures which were not rendered impracticable by the COVID restrictions. Certainly, the board benefited from the wages subsidy. Why would it not? This enabled all staff to be retained and put to a wider range of activities than usual to keep the property in its current excellent condition. You will see that there was a greater emphasis on community involvement given the limitations on structured gatherings. Community activities come at a cost to the trust, while fee-paying people and groups have been reluctant to plan for future gatherings. Credit for these results is due to management and staff, and to a lesser extent, board members. But it is a further regret that since the review process commenced, and through the difficult times, there has been little or no credit given by councillors or council staff to our management and staff. So now we await the unfolding of the bright new vision that council has for Acacia Birch. But I want to emphasise to the community at large that this is your asset and it is your responsibility to ensure that the heritage and the amenities are preserved and enhanced for your benefit. And finally, now that I have more time on my hands, I would ask Council to get on with finishing the track from the city to Ashurst. Thank you.
It's a very timely comment. Thank you. Thank you for taking time to speak to us today and present the annual report. Elected members, are there any questions for Keisha Birch? Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and acknowledging the report that we received and noting commentary from the board chair. Just wanted to understand, and it's probably more of a question for council staff rather than elsewhere. As the chair indicated, this is the final annual report, but yet we're now in a transition year, and PNCC is not fully on the reins until July 2022 onwards. So for FY22, the 12 months that we're in, I'd like to understand what the reporting arrangements are, given that we have now seen the final report from the board.
So, Hannah White, our Democracy and Governance Manager, is just coming to answer that question.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. While the Trust Board is acting as a CCO, the reporting requirements of the Local Government Act will still apply, so officers will work to ensure that that happens over that period.
So can I follow up to clarify? My understanding of the answer then is that in fact this is not the final report, and that there is a subsequent report that we would expect in 12 months' time?
This is the final annual report that the board will be presenting to you, because that financial year will finish right on that transition period. But there will need to be a mop-up of the financial status of the accounts at the point that comes in-house. So we'll need to report back to you to show the final year, but it won't be the report as required by a CCO. It will just be to inform you of the status at the time.
Thanks, that's helpful. So it is something that is yet to be reflected in the work schedule in terms of that opportunity. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Grant, you might be able to answer this one for me, or it might be Hannah, but I noted, and this is common across all the CCOs, that we're having problems with the audited accounts because of the impact of COVID on Audit New Zealand. Have you any indication of when you expect your audited accounts to be available?
The answer is not until next year. This will be, I think, certainly the second year in which we'll be going to our AGM with unaudited accounts, with draft accounts. They have advised us, the Audit Office have advised us that they are running well behind. They're short of staff. They don't expect to see us until, I think, January or February of next year.
Okay. And you've been through this process many times. Do you have how would you describe your level of confidence having presented your accounts in their unaudited form? Do you feel like they're pretty solid?
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. That tells me what I need to know. There are no further questions, Grant, so thank you for your time, and I will open for comments if you want to stay online to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, elected members, to move to the recommendation, which will be that Council receives Cutch Birch Trust Board's annual report 2020-2021, attachment 2 of the memorandum titled Cutch Birch Trust Board Annual Report 2020-21, presented to the Arts, Culture and Heritage Committee on 17 November 2021. I will move, seconded by Councillor Barrett. Opening for comments, Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just really wanted to acknowledge the Chair and Trustees of Kitcheburch House Trust for their servanthood governance of that facility, but also the great good nature that's been brought forward to look forward the transition into House to Council. Just as a recent user of the facility, they've actually got a fantastic environment for community groups to host service delivery in for different events, being able to self-cater and to host their own functions. And so really just in this transitional stage, I know that in our last minutes we've just approved, having that community involvement in the in-house service delivery I think is very important to have that accessibility for the wider public to have, rather than having a contract in place that limits that ability to have that style of community event, making it cost prohibitive or restrictions on catering. So that would be my takeout learning from that recent experience, to really plug in at this point while we're doing the transition, to keep that in front of mind when we're doing the detail to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dennison. I'd like to echo those thanks to the Trust Board for their service during this time, which has undoubtedly been challenging on many fronts. Thanks to the Trust Board members who've served for a very long time and have felt a personal commitment to the building and the asset that it is to our city. And thanks as well to Trust Board members who've come on in the last couple of years, to help us work through this difficult process. And I think we've all recognised that has been a difficult process for the Trust Board, for their staff and management, and also for council staff and management as we've worked through this. So I don't accept the comment made by the Chair that there has been an absence of help and concern from council officers, or in fact from elected members. I categorically actually refute that. I have seen an incredible amount of concern demonstrated through this chamber and through our community engagement to secure, again that word, I'm not trying to buy anything, the future of Carcher Birch House as an asset for our community. And the Chair talked about the very significant heritage asset that it is. Of course, it is our concern to retain that and to enable access for our community. And it will remain the concern of elected members going forward. There's been some discussion through this process that councils come and go, but the Trust Board is here together forever. Actually, council is here forever. We are just the baton carriers at this particular stage. Council will go on in perpetuity, and the value of Carcher Birch House to our community is something that we'll carry with us, whoever is seated around this table. So I will ask you to vote to receive that report. Thank you. Carried unanimously, thank you. Our next cab off the rank, lost my space in my pages, is the Regent Theatre Trust, which is page 65 if you're struggling to find it like me. Again, there is a memorandum presented by Hannah White, which we will take as read and open to the Regent Theatre Trust Board. Whoever is online. David Walsh is online. Thank you, David. Open to you for any comments.
Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me. I know last time I did this, you couldn't see or hear me, so it's nice to be seen and heard this time. I actually clicked in quite early and I heard Alan Nagi's comments before I start, and we too are very disappointed that they're not going to be here Act 3 in August next year, but hopefully we will have a successful season of We Will Rock You in January, February, which will carry us through. Now to start on my report, first off, apologies from our chairman, David Lee, who is out of town, unfortunately, today. So it was in April that I reported to this committee on our 6 months result, and I concluded with the COVID issues, the ticketing issues, the staffing issues, and the building issues. But we're excited to be working in such an environment. Well, now it's time to present the 12-month report, and not much has changed. After the great innovation by dividing the theatre into quadrants during the restricted COVID levels at the start of our year, our business from that point slowly started to pick up. after a raft of cancellations of bookings. The second half of the year produced some remarkable results, considering the unknown impact that this virus, COVID, would bring. We are happy to report that our final financial results for the year were better than what we had forecast, and we showed a small surplus before depreciation on our results. One of the benefits of COVID and the restrictions it brought to the world meant that this city was able to experience some world-class entertainment during this time, which would not have occurred if we were still in the good old days. Crowded House would never have played Palmerston North if they were allowed to travel overseas during this period, but after successful negotiations, we managed to secure them, and they performed to a capacity house at the Regent in March. We were the only theatre that they performed in, as the rest of their tour was in stadiums or outdoor venues. We also thank the government during this time for allowing the Wiggles into the country at a time when it was, and still is, controversial to secure MIQ places. Over 2,500 people enjoyed their concert at the Regent, but more importantly, one Regent Theatre General Manager enjoyed the financial results even more, an incredible response with an even more incredible merchandise sales, on which we were receiving commissions. Business picked up during April through to June, and it was pleasing to have the Massey graduation back at the theatre first week of May. Over 7,000 people were able to attend the ceremonies. A variety of other events during this time saw schools return for their productions, local dance schools perform, cultural events occurring, tribute shows performing, which gave us all a false sense of security as to what was to come at the start of our 2021-22 year. This year has seen the Council, Trust Board and Management working in well together. We achieved approximately 60% of our performance measures, and considering the impact COVID had on us at the start of the year and the number of cancelled events that we experienced, we were very pleased with the final outcomes for the year. My GM's report in the annual document started with a year of challenges, which no doubt will be the start of next year's report as well. We don't know what the future will continue to bring to our industry, but I know that people want to be entertained and they need to get out. So we will do our very best to ensure that a diverse selection of events and programs are secured so the Regent will continue to have a major impact to the well-being of this community. That's my report.
Thank you very much, David. Are you actually on the stage of the Regent, or is that just a backdrop?
Didn't I do well?
Didn't you?
No, it's just a backdrop.
Ah, excellent. I did think that was quite a technical thing to go parking yourself in the middle of the stage. David, I just wanted to ask, this isn't really about your annual report, but it is in a way, so bear with. In the officer's report, we mentioned 4 measures that didn't achieve the target, and included in that are things like school concerts and school prize givings. I wondered if you could explain that for us. Is that a COVID casualty, or is there something else going on there?
With the school concerts, it's usually every second year that a school will perform on stage one of their productions. And we had a lot of cancellations last year. We had programmed, off the top of my head, I think 9, and we only achieved 5 or 7. So we failed there. Schools are slowly starting to come back in for next year. This year, school prize giving, the Ministry of Education has advised schools to concentrate on their curriculum as opposed to social type events. So we're losing events there as well.
Okay, thank you. And in the Target Dashboard annual results, it talks about the average size of audience per event, which, on first glance I thought was probably a COVID figure. But you're sitting at average audience sizes of a downward 3-year trend, down from 270 to 219, which seems very low in a venue with a capacity of 1,400. So could you say more about that for us, please?
Well, I think Sister Act would account for a lot of that, because we were limited in the number of people that we could have in the theatre. And on 1,300 seat theatre, we could only have a maximum of 400 people. And so the numbers were reduced there, and that also applied to some other events as well throughout the year. So our capacity of the theatre was reduced at certain times.
So would it be helpful in future to position targets rather than being a numerical target, more as a percentage of capacity, if capacity is something that is going to fluctuate with different COVID restrictions?
Well, the capacity is fluctuating on Friday night, whereas we can have unlimited people in the theatre now, but we still have to have social distancing. So we're trying to work out what our capacity will be. We're saying 600. It looks like it's going to be slightly smaller than that. Our capacity, allowing social distancing, will only be around about 540. So yes, we can work on percentages, but each event is going to be different, because the day will come we are back to 1,300 seats, which we will fill.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, David. And firstly, to acknowledge all the great work through the year, and thank you for taking us through the highlights. It's always a bit inevitable that the questions end up focusing on some of the gaps. Just wanted to understand, there is some commentary in the covering paper, and I think I saw some of the origins of it in the Regent's report around the choice to not secure a capital grant for capital improvements in the Regent, and just wanted to understand really the context around that choice, and what the sort of ongoing effects are in terms of capital needs for the facility.
There were some items purchased on capital, but not what we said that we were going to do, or what was already written in our statement of intent. I think we had $70,000 we were going to get from the Friends. It was a combination of the COVID and the issues we were going through with that, with the change of management. I started the year, and then halfway through we had Kathy, and she was here for part of the year, and then I came back in for the other part of the year. So part of it was a management issue as well. We're rectifying that this year. I've already spoken to the Friends. I've already given them a heads up as to some capital items that we require this financial year. We're doing some capital purchases backstage as well, and we're going to seek funding for that. So we're back on target again this year.
Thanks, David. Appreciate that context. So just then, in terms of this year, when you say on target, that's sort of at the level for a typical year, or are you trying to grab back a bit of what wasn't able to be delivered in the prior year?
It's an interesting one, because we do rely, I suppose is the word you use, on the Friends to help us out to buy some of these capital projects. With the non-events that are happening, with the bars not opening and the ice cream stalls not opening, their revenue has been cut. So all of a sudden we decided to limit ourselves to what amount we can get from them for items. But we do have an asset plan as to some capital purchases. So I don't think we're doing a catch-up. We're just sort of progressing steadily ahead.
Great. Thank you, David. Appreciate those answers, Madam Chair.
Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this report. I was just thinking about the capacity issues, following on from the Chair's comments around, I guess, using that as a percentage. And I was just wondering about the barriers with that. I'm just thinking about when I go to the movies with my family, we take out an entire row. And so is that the kind of system that you've got at the moment, where you are doing the social distancing based on the people who end up booking the tickets in the end and doing it via that way? Or are you doing blocks of people?
With the social distancing, we're still in a learning phase because the types of events we've had recently have only been with small numbers. So we haven't had any major concerns. We had altogether now last Saturday night, which we had close to 300 people in the stalls. I thought that we were social distance fine because we don't know who belongs to who. We encourage people to sit apart from other people. I did get a letter of complaint about it, so we're tweaking that for this coming week. We'll be taking out every second row to allow more space for people because we want people to be comfortable when they go into the venue, but also we want them to be responsible as well because, as I said at the start, we don't know who belongs to who, and we just encourage people to stay in their bubbles at all times, and don't sit next to someone you don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. There are no further questions, David, so thank you for taking time to present your report for us today. I will move into comments now, and you're very welcome to listen in for those. So the recommendation is that we receive the Regent Theatre Trust Board's annual report 2020-2021, attachment 2 of the memorandum titled the Regent Theatre Trust Annual Report 2020-21, presented to the Arts, Culture and Heritage Committee on 17 November 2021. I will move that, seconded by Councillor Barrett, and open for any comments. Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say a massive congratulations to the Regent, the board, the Friends of the Regent, everyone involved in that team for keeping this theatre going. I actually was feeling quite proud of myself for attending as many Regent things as I could, and then I saw the list and I thought, oh wait, I haven't even scratched the surface there. So there has still been quite a few things that have happened over this time, even though it has been a really difficult year. And the thing that I'm most pleased about is actually their attitude towards it. The comment of you know, the silver linings of COVID and being able to get crowded house, that is really cool. And I think if we keep looking at the positive sides and what we're actually doing in such a difficult environment, you know, we'll be able to hang in there with a lot more positivity. So massive thank you for all the work that they're doing.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would tautoko what Councillor Dingwall said and just congratulate the board and the staff on what they have been able to achieve. In terms of how they performed, actually it was much more positive than I thought it was going to be. And, you know, when you think about the ability of a theatre to pivot in a COVID environment, it is very limited on what you can do by way of changing the way you operate or the use of the facilities. So actually I think they've done a remarkable job of keeping their head above the water. The list, as Councillor Dingwall said, the list is still really great of what has been through. And so overall I think that whilst there have been some aspects that haven't been achieved, overall it's really positive, and even the contribution to those, some of those things that weren't quite achieved are still really positive. So yeah, just absolutely give them credit where credit's due.
Agree. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to join the chorus of congratulations and appreciation to the Regent Trust Board staff and volunteers through the Friends of the Regent and other avenues of volunteering. The main comment that I wanted to add is around that point around capital works and the activity on the Regent Trust Board and management side of that equation, and am heartened to hear that it was more of a blip rather than an ongoing interruption of that approach on their side, ensuring that that capital works are being delivered, well, resourced and then delivered. My feeling is that from a council point of view, the staff are leaning quite strongly into the building and related aspects of reporting to give us good visibility on what's happening on the council side of the coin, and really encouraging to hear that the Trust Board likewise and management are maintaining a focus on the capital works that they can contribute through those funding mechanisms that they have access to. So look forward to seeing that coming back into alignment in the next report.
I'll just wrap up there with my comment, which of course echo yours in terms of passing on thanks to the Trust Board, to the staff and to the Friends of the Regent and other volunteers who operate that facility for us. You know, as David said in his comments, the second half of the year was remarkable, and I think felt even more remarkable because of how awful the first half of the year was. And we continue to live in that environment, but we should take this moment, and I think we are taking this moment, to recognise what has been achieved in an incredibly challenging environment by some very, very committed individuals, and we're grateful for that and for the benefits that that brings to our community. Yeah, and note as we go into 2021-22 that what this year looks like is a little bit out of our hands and out of the hands of the Regent Trust Board. The Regent is in probably the most difficult of situations of any of our CCOs, in that they're in a very large capacity venue, but not quite large enough to be getting any help from the government. So, you know, sitting under that 5,000 person level that the government has decided is where support will sit, the Regent is making the best of it. And hopefully the vaccine passport coming in will help them to increase the capacity that they can carry in that venue. But there is no question that this next year will also be challenging. But if we look to their past performance as the best indicator of future performance, I look forward to another remarkable year. So thank you very much to the Regent, and I will ask you to vote to receive that recommendation, receive that report. Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Elected members, my intention is to take the Globe Theatre Trust annual report next and then break for a break after that. So that will leave Te Manawa having a little time for a break before they report, just in case that's useful information online. So item 13 on our agenda is the Globe Theatre Trust Board annual report. The usual memo from Hannah, which we will take as read, and hand over, I think, to Jerry Keating, their manager, who is online with Margaret May, board member. Jerry, I'm not sure that background is at all appropriate. You are really pushing your luck. But you're amongst friends for now, so we'll let you get away with it. And I understand that you have a presentation for us, Jerry.
No, sorry, Madam Chair, I didn't go ahead with that presentation. I spoke to Natalia earlier on about that.
Great, you can sing and dance then. Off you go.
I can sing and dance, that's the last thing you want. First of all, I'd just like to offer apologies from our chairperson, John Adams. He was unable to attend online today. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, City Councillors, Palmerston North staff, and everybody watching online. It is my pleasure to present the Globe Theatre Trust Board annual report for July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. We came into the new financial year off the back of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our experience of the recent lockdown meant that we faced the new year with some uncertainty. Are we going to have to cancel shows? How many refunds will we have to give? Will we be able to stay open? Do we keep taking bookings? Will I still have a job? Having experienced over 2 months of lockdown with no shows, it would have been very easy for us to take a negative approach to the year. However, that is not how we roll at the Globe Theatre. Targets set for the year had been adjusted with PNCC staff consultation due to the COVID pandemic. As it turns out, we experienced a fantastic year. 535 usages and 285 performances. Over 23,000 people watched the show, and even more importantly, over 3,000 participants took to the stage, worked backstage, or were somehow involved in the running of the show. We are a community theatre and we showcase our community, and it was very pleasing to note that 75% of our theatre hireage came from community users. As the year progressed, it was always in the back of our minds that we could be closed at any time. And of course, we remember August and September when we went into level 2 for approximately 6 weeks. We needed to be adaptable and flexible. We needed to be supportive and creative with our hirers and understanding with our patrons. The relationship we have with our hirers allows us to work very closely with them. There were many times when they wanted to postpone or cancel a show, but didn't because we were able to come up with a solution. Likewise with our patrons. We had already instigated our COVID-19 refund policy back in March 2020, and this continued throughout the year. Being adaptable and flexible allowed us to keep the theatre open when it would have been easier to close, and working closely with our MOU groups and hirers became even more important. An example of this was the 2020 Manawatu Jazz Festival. Due to take place over the Queen's Birthday weekend, the festival is a huge annual event for Palmerston North and Vanuatu. However, with the pandemic, the festival was cancelled. That didn't sit very well with us. So we got together with the Manawatu Theatre Society, the Manawatu Jazz Club and Roger Fox, and the next thing we know, MTS have given up the first weekend of their November residency, and the Manawatu Jazz Festival that counted is on stage. Maybe not as big as their usual Queen's Birthday extravaganza, but still a very successful festival. Financially, we returned a surplus of just over $73,000. This was similar to the previous year. However, the previous year included over $120,000 in fundraising for new theatre equipment, while this year we had a decent increase in ticket sales. With the financial implications of COVID facing us, we pulled back on our planned theatre equipment upgrade as it didn't feel right to apply to external funders when the country was still reeling from the pandemic. That being said, we did apply to Pub Charity and were successful for a grant of $25,000 for a new projector and screen for Globe One. We continued with our performer venue split, which was welcomed by 18 different performing groups and resulted in 22 performances in both theatres. Our Memorandum of Understanding groups continue to be the backbone of the theatre, along with our regular repeat hirers. Highlights of the year, of which there are many. The Manawatu Theatre Society and the Pirates of Penzance. Manawatu Youth Theatre and the Little Mermaid. Fafinga, Sorry About It, and his 2 sold-out shows in one night. L. John Fitzgerald and his 4 friends and a funeral. 2 sold-out shows in October, followed by a return sold-out performance in November. Local musician Carson Tade. Renee Strawbridge and the Aotearoa Country Music Awards. The wonderful IPU Kodama Drum Team. Ian Harmon and his Mr. Lola Illusion and the Boom Boom Room Burlesque. And the Comedy Hub, who perform at the theatre every month and continue to build the craft of comedy throughout the year with their regular workshops. And of course, we were very pleased to be a part of the Papayoya Festival of the Arts. While the festival itself lost several shows to COVID, we showed our adaptability and flexibility by facilitating 6 shows from 3 different performers over 3 nights. We continue to work with council officers on various fronts, and we are looking forward to finally starting the Globe One backstage toilets renovations, which are planned for January to March 2022. What could have been a very hard year for the theatre didn't eventuate. The variety and range of shows and events that we hosted were outstanding, and we are extremely honoured to have worked with so many groups and individuals over the past 12 months. We are approaching the next year with enthusiasm and excitement, and are looking forward to the Evans Awards night on November 25th, where we have made the final 3 in the Small Venue of the Year award. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerry. That was a whistle-stop tour through
Sorry.
an incredible year. I'm sure I'm not speaking just for myself when I was absolutely amazed to read your annual report. Actually, I think it would have stood up well in a normal year, let alone a COVID year. So I'm sure there may well be comments on that. Are there any questions for the Globe elected members? I'll just give them a moment to think. I did have a question, Jerry, on the MOU agreements that are part of your targets. It all just seemed to get a bit complicated. And I wondered if you could speak to, it's 3.5 in the officer's report. So you have 2 targets about proportion of use that's driven through MOU arrangements and is performance-based. And there was some discussion about how that was really all quite tricky to measure. So I wondered if you would just talk to us about that a little bit.
Not a problem. As it says in I think it's the council officer's report about our annual report. So we have a number of MOU groups, and one of the targets that we had set was that a certain percentage of their usage would be performance. So it's kind of taken me, I will say it's taken me at least 2 years to just get my head around all of our KPIs, etc., and get an understanding of how everything works here at the theatre. And one thing that I've noticed is that we work really closely with our MOU groups, and a lot of them perform and run workshops. So having a target of something like, say, 63% or 70% of their usage being performance-based, because of the number of workshops that, especially the Comedy Hub, are now operating, or I think I use Myth as one of my examples, in the sense that in July, they did 13 performances, but they used the theatre 40 times. So we're coming in straight away unable to, I think, achieve that because of the number of, I guess, with the Theatre Society and with Myth, the number of rehearsals that they are performing and using, and we record them as a usage. And likewise with the Comedy Hub. The Comedy Hub produce, I think they do 12 shows, one show a month, 12 shows a year, but they run probably 2 to 3 workshops throughout the year as well. So that's why we are re-evaluating that kind of a target to have it in our statement of intent for 2022 to 25.
Thank you, Jerry. Question from Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Jerry, for the report, and congratulations on the year. A bit of a general question, but just wanted to understand, I guess, as COVID continues to be a thing that we respond to in various ways, the sort of requests that you're getting from users, are they moving more into digital and online needs in terms of connectivity into the venue? And if so, how well is the Globe set up to respond around online connectivity and meetings and activities that are hybrid between the online world and the physical world?
At the moment, we're not receiving any requests from our users to go online. We have had a couple of discussions with a few people just in passing about, I guess, the Vagina Monologues, which was took place recently. That was a discussion because obviously with COVID level 2 and the restrictions on the theatre with social distancing, we did discuss whether that was something that we could look at or they could look at. But we are a theatre, and I want to get people on stage, and I want to get, we want to get an audience in the theatre. I feel that our social distancing protocols at the moment are hitting the mark. We're working with all of our hirers to, explain how it operates and how it all works, and getting them to liaise with all of their supporters when it comes to booking online and making sure that we keep to our bubbles and everybody is safe. So, yes, so that's where we are at the moment.
Thank you. Then just, I guess, to follow up, if you were to start receiving requests that did have higher demands around online connectivity, would you feel the Globe would be well positioned to respond to those if they were, appropriate and activities of interest for the Globe?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, at the end of the day, if somebody wants to perform on the stage and stream the show to an online audience, we will work with them to achieve that aim. Obviously, we would prefer to have people sitting in the audience, but we are aware that obviously, yes, in the future, we just don't know what's going to happen with COVID, do we? So we do have a lot of our shows that do get recorded for the performers' usage. But yeah, we would have no problem working with anybody if that was the avenue they wanted to go down.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it, and congratulations again, Jerry, on the year, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry, there are no further questions, so I will move to put the recommendation to elected members. So moving that the committee recommends that Council receive the Globe Theatre Trust Board's annual report 2020-21, attachment 2 of the memorandum titled The Globe Theatre Trust Annual Report 2020-21, presented to the Arts, Culture and Heritage Committee on the 17th of November 2021. I've moved it, seconded by Councillor Barrett, and open for comments. And I see those coming in there. I'll just start, well, as I said to Jerry, what an incredible year the Globe has had. It's easy to cherry pick, you know, the odd good event, and if I was going to, then I would choose Manawatu Youth Theatre, because as it says in the report there, 8 days, 13 shows, and a total audience of 2,492. That's an average of 192 people per show, which is incredible. But if you just cherry pick that, you might think that was all they did this year. That was their highlight. But looking to the report, number of performances against a target of 185, they achieved 285 performances. Audience figures, against an ambitious target, they achieved 23,225. That's nearly double the audience that they've achieved in some non-COVID years. The figures are truly staggering, and the Globe have done an amazing, amazing job with that, which I know is down to good leadership from their board, good leadership from their manager and staff, and an active and engaged volunteer community. So I very much wanted to express my appreciation to those people today. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yes, absolutely in the same vein. I just can't go without comment that this has been an absolutely stellar year for the Globe. I mean, not only on the performance side, but also the financial side. And when you consider that that's in a year that has been affected by COVID-19 restrictions, it makes it even more extraordinary. So congratulations to everyone involved. But I think in particular it's worth noting that I think it's Jerry's attitude of go the extra mile, make it work, be positive. I think that that's had a huge bearing on the success. So I know it's always a team effort, but I do think, Jerry, that you deserve a special pat on the back. Fair play to you. It is an absolutely excellent result. Thanks.
Yes, absolutely agree. And on that note, we will put this recommendation to the vote, please. Carried unanimously by an ever-decreasing number. And now we will break for afternoon tea. I make it just before 3 by that clock, so we're back at 3:15, please, everybody. Kia ora koutou, let's get back into it. Thank you. So we're moving to item 14 on our order paper, which is the Te Manawa Museums Trust Board draft annual report. And I'm hoping we are joined online by Andy Lowe, CE. Come in, Andy. There he is. Oh, with John in the background. Kia ora, John.
John, yes.
And is that Catherine's shoulder?
We've got Catherine too.
Excellent. Lovely to see you all. Over to you to present your report, please. Over to you, Andy. All
Right.
yours.
Tēnā tātou. E kui mā, e koro mai, e rauranga tira mā, e ngā mātāwaka, ngā paimaunga, ngā waiawa o te motu, tēnā tātou. Ko tēnei te ringa o te tangata e noho nei ki raro i te marumaru o Tararua Maunga. E rere te awa o Manawatu ki a tāhuna ārua, te kainga o ngā tini whetū ki te rangi ko Rangitāne. Tā ki te kōrero, mā whero mā pango ka ōti te mahi, mā tōraurau, mā tōku raurau, ka ora ai te iwi ara, ka pū ai te katoa nō reira. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Oh, kia ora everybody. Thank you so much for having us here, albeit on this little tiny screen. And we have Catherine and John here in the room. We're not having a party. It might look like it, but we're not. Right now, there is some chocolate around though. But just really wanted to thank you all for your support for council, for your understanding and good humour over the past year. City councillors and staff have been really fantastic and constantly there to help navigate the tricky waters that we've all been swimming in. So, you know, really huge thanks to you all. In terms of Te Manawa, I'm really proud of the resilience and flexibility of the team and the sheer numbers of achievements over the year. And I really appreciate the great support of John, our chair, and the Trust Board, iwi, stakeholders and supporters. You've seen the report, it's a scaled down version as we haven't been able to be audited yet, but we're looking forward to that probably in March next year, according to Audit New Zealand. And our AGM will be next week. So we're back to front in terms of some of the information you might have usually had by now about what we're up to. But I just really wanted to touch on some of Te Manawa's focus areas and achievements over the year. We had a lot of direction from council and we undertook a lot of strategic planning, particularly in funding and strategic relationships. And both those plans are now in the final stages of development. We developed a robust business plan that includes a solid stakeholder relationship management and inclusion, fundraising and a 3-year program of exhibitions, upgrades and key events supported by innovative learning programs. We commissioned and carried out in-depth visitor market research, 2 reports on the economic benefits of Te Manawa by Morris Hargreaves McIntyre, who specialise in the cultural sector, and Events Insight led by Phil Hildred. The comprehensive Morris Hargreaves McIntyre report gave us confidential information on the CNZ audience atlas that you heard about from CNZ today. So we sort of heard about that first as part of the Morris Hargreaves work. We also commissioned an environmental impact report that helped us with the Gold Coalmark accreditation we received in this financial year. So we really focused on relationship development with both staff and external stakeholders, including societies. We worked on team building, leadership and creating a wellbeing plan. The wellbeing plan focused on improving organisational communication and leadership capability. Our staff intranet launched on the 20th of March and leadership and managers undertook a program endorsed by Chard Consultants and developed by Louise Mara of Leadership New Zealand to incorporate Te Ao Māori, Te Reo and Te Tiriti o Waitangi training. We're really excited to finalise the MOU with Romomo Productions, which enhance our close working relationship with Rangi Māori and Marae. That acts as a conduit for Rangitāne, Ngā Wā Katoa and other iwi. This is a first for museums in Aotearoa and has really been successful in driving our bicultural work forward, particularly for rangatahi. And it'll be really important with the imminence of the new curriculum that considers Te Ao Māori and Māori history on whole new levels. And since signing the MOU, the opportunities to work with and assistance from iwi has blossomed. Just some highlights. Just want to point to our stretch target of 150,000 physical visitors we wanted to get through the doors. And in the COVID year managed to get 130 or close to 136,000, which we thought was pretty amazing given the year that we're in. Some other highlights including learning. So the learning outside the classroom numbers were exceeded by 83%. For this calendar year, Te Manawa had achieved its LEO2C performance target within 7 months. And at a recent Ministry of Education evaluation meeting, the assessor congratulated Te Manawa on achievement of visit numbers, along with excellent qualitative feedback. We did work, as you know, towards the Qualmark Gold certification. We surpassed a third-party revenue target by $100,000 and achieved 672,709. Resident survey, over 80% of the population were satisfied with Te Manawa. Opened 18 exhibitions, over 100 events, not including openings, and had public positive feedback for 99%, good to excellent. In terms of international connection, we managed to source, as you would have seen, 2 international exhibitions, International Wildlife Photographer of the Year and Curious Contraptions, both from London, with some New Zealand added flavour. And we've just been able to extend Curious Contraptions to enable more people to see it. I was keynote speaker for the Alberta Museums Association in Canada, which was something they wanted us to do based on the work we've been doing on inclusivity in museums. And they loved our online show, Everyday People, that happened through lockdown last year. And just recently, we've been setting up the online experiences, and that's kind of now, but the thought work happened last financial year around that. In terms of national things, we've loaned artworks to important exhibitions, Toi Tū Toi Ora at Auckland Art Gallery, which was the first major nationwide survey of contemporary Māori visual art since 2008. And we loaned 2 Ralph Hōtiri paintings for a large survey exhibition of Hōtiri's work held at Dunedin Public Art Gallery and Christchurch Art Gallery. Ngā tour the exhibition went to the Coach House Museum in Fielding. 1900s ball gown was lent to Te Papa for photography and inclusion in a new book by Te Papa Press. I was invited to speak at Queering the Museum conference at the Auckland Museum. All sorts of amazing things have happened over this year that we've been working on. In terms of online teaching, the learning team have been providing classes not just to the Manawatu, but they've been approached by Auckland schools and have been providing programs to them online during the lockdown. And Te Papa Board obviously has been assisting us with everything in terms of what they can do for around the COVID issues and challenges. Some innovative things we're working on for the future. So, as you know, public holiday coming up in terms of Matariki 2022 with Rongomai Productions, Rangi Māori, Norwine and Co. We've got an indicative Te Ao Māori events plan, which has been developed for the 2022 calendar year. And this will see events primarily clustered around Waitangi Day, Matariki Puanga and Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori. And we're seeking external funding for those specific initiatives around those things. We've got the Airbnb online experiences up and running now. We just started. We made the appointment to that role of online experience developer to Andy Liebst, and he's been trialling some online virtual tours of the museum and experiences through the Airbnb and Eventbrite platforms. Potama project, which I talked about at another council meeting, we received funding from DIA to do, and this was put together to fill some of the needs identified by Community Services Council. The team have got some workshops this week that will focus on social media, how to advertise your business, design thinking, and reading beyond the label, which is about which showcases resources we have at Te Manawa in terms of people and programs. So those are just a few things that we're driving forward at the moment. But just really wanted to thank you again for your support and constant ideas about things we can do for the future, and really appreciate all of your support in terms of that. Nō reira, kamutu, taku nei kōrero kia koutou katoa, I runga te kaupok te rā. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Andy. I will open up for any questions here. I just wanted to start, Andy, by asking, so I read in the officer's report, and you've just talked about the MOU with Rongomai Productions, which you said is a first in Aotearoa. I actually can't believe that. Can you explain to me how no other museum in New Zealand has an MOU with their iwi or with a Māori production company?
It's specific to us in terms of the fact that it's based in Tino Rangatiratanga. So it allows iwi to represent themselves, to do what they believe the iwi needs to do and how they want to present themselves in different ways in a museum. That's quite unusual because usually you'll have museum staff and leadership sort of curating or asking the iwi to present themselves in a certain way. So this way, it's a very it's based on independence of the iwi to decide how they want to be represented and what they want to do there.
Could I just add to that? So I don't want to be too visible, Catherine, so stay there. Look, I think really the foundation of that comes from the 2 iwi representatives that we've had on our board, and I was initially surprised that we'd already had iwi reps on the board for a long time when I first joined the Te Manawa board, and since then I've noticed that our relationship has matured and developed so that it's just a natural part of the way that Te Manawa operates. When we're doing things and discussing matters in a general business context within our board meetings, we have an input from iwi that just gives us a context that's sometimes flavoured just a little bit differently, so that when the Rongomai Productions proposal came up, it took a while to sort of generate the MOU and to work out just exactly how it would work. But in the end, it became quite easy to formalise that and put it in place. So I think there's a historical context for it, and that comes back from PNCC's original appointment of 2 iwi representatives chosen by iwi and appointed by them. So I think that's probably something lacking in other organisations.
Thank you, John and Andy. And I suppose following on from that, I had a question about your work this year with strategic partners, noting that that's due to carry on forward next year. We've got that included in our statement of expectation coming up. But, would you like to just talk us through how that's gone this year? Who do you call strategic partners and how has that gone?
That's right. We do have a lot. We are working through the MOUs with our societies at the moment, and we're getting to a good place with all of them, actually. We've got a project, a couple of projects in the pipeline with the Te Manawa Art Society and also the Science Centre Trust. And there's another one coming up that we've just received funding for. Last year we received funding for with the Museum Society. So those ones are, I feel like those are going really well. And there's a number of other ones we're working closely with as well in terms of those relationships.
Thank you. No further questions from this side of the screen. So we will move to the recommendation and comments. You're very welcome to hang around remotely while we do that. So the committee recommends that Council receive Te Manawa Museums Trust Board's Draft Annual Report 2020-21, Attachment 2 of the memorandum titled Te Manawa Museums Trust Annual Report 2020-21, presented to the Arts, Culture and Heritage Committee on 17 November 2021. I will move that, seconded by Councillor Barrett. Open for any comments. I'll start by thanking, as usual, the Trust Board, the staff and the volunteers at Te Manawa for a year of the way that they have risen to the challenge of the surprises that have been put in their way. And Te Manawa probably face different challenges than the rest of our CCOs. I think people have been a little cautious about coming back into a museum space because it is less structured than, say, a theatre space where you sit down and you can see who's around you. And they have navigated that in a way that is no surprise, well, to me and hopefully to us, because they're a trusted part of our community. People express that clearly in the feedback. There's a lot of trust for the work that they do. If I had to have one word for Te Manawa's year, it would probably be pivot. That's what they've done, and I've really enjoyed their adventures into the online space, and particularly noting their new appointment in online experiences, where we have gone behind the scenes at the museum in a very creative and sometimes surprising way, which I think has gone down very well with our community. So congratulations to you all on a great year. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yes, I just wanted to highlight some of the things that have gone, I think, extremely well this year for Te Manawa. Firstly, the significant increase in visitor numbers, and that's despite COVID restrictions being in place for, I think it's 7 weeks of the year. The external funding success, particularly the continued innovation, which I think gives you that kind of feeling of excitement about Te Manawa, and you never quite know what's coming next, which I quite enjoy. The iwi relationship building, which I think is a good, it's a good role modelling for other organisations in the city, both, public and commercial, in what's required to achieve a trusting and productive relationship, and being in it for the long term. And I think that is really bearing fruit, and I'm pleased to see it. And also the links now with the community sector and providing workshops around social media. I think that's really good kind of cross-fertilisation across different sectors. So all in all, a very successful year, and congratulations to the whole team.
Thank you. No further comments, so we will vote on the recommendation. Carried unanimously. So, moving to item 15 on our agenda, Statements of Expectation for Cultural Council Controlled Organisations 2022 to 2023, presented by Gillian Tasker and Stephanie Velvin, Community Development Managers. Gillian, Stephanie, thank you for bearing with us this afternoon, and over to you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr Mayor, councillors and everyone present and online. So we're here to talk about the Statement of Expectations called Gillian Tasker Takuangawa. My name is Gillian Tasker, and I'm joined by Co-Community Development Manager, Steph. The Rolling Review Programme, where a full-scale Statement of Expectation will be developed for one of the Cultural Council-controlled organisations each year, was disrupted by COVID-19 this year. Elected members were emailed the proposed Statement of Expectation actions for each CCO, and their feedback is incorporated in the letters presented today. Officers have also met with the Chair and Manager of the Globe, the Regent and Te Manawa to discuss the Statements of Expectation. Following these, there is one recommended amendment to the SOE for the Regent. The Regent report that they have addressed the final issue in the table under Section 2, Development of the Statement of Intent. They have reviewed employee leave procedures and reduced employee leave liabilities accordingly, and officers recommend that this item is removed from the Regent's Statement of Expectation. It is proposed that next CCO to receive an in-depth Statement of Expectation for 2023 will be the Globe, and officers will begin work with the Globe Trust Board early in 2022. If the recommendations are adopted today, council officers will send the Statements of Expectation attached to the cultural CCOs in December and confirm that they provide strategic guidance for the Statements of Intent for 2022 to 2025. The draft Statements of Intent are due to Council by the 1st of March 2022, and they will be presented at the April Arts, Culture and Heritage Committee meeting for comment. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Gillian. I'll open that for questions. Thank you for addressing that issue about the Regent's employee cost liabilities. I did have a question about that, and we are just going to amend, so it's as amended in brackets there. That does make sense. My question, I think, is about the rolling programme of in-depth reviews. Do you feel it's appropriate to go ahead with that in the current environment with the amount of uncertainty our CCOs are facing?
We actually selected the Globe because we feel that they're actually in a really good place, and this is an opportunity for the Globe Trust Board to work with ourselves and with Council to actually look ahead and really look at where they want to go in the next 3 years from 2022.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Steph and Julian. I just had a question about the measures for the Globe based on the comments from the manager on their annual report around using percentage of performances for the MOUs and percentage of new community groups having performances, and whether those measures need to be looked at, because if the number of performances goes up hugely, as it has done, that affects the percentages. And so, you know, if you're just looking at is it achieved or not achieved, then you have to say it's not achieved. But that may not be the best measure. So is that something that needs to be addressed at this point? Or what's your opinion about that, I guess?
Through the chair, yes, it's actually in the comments that we will be discussing new performance measures, and that the discussion that was supposed to have happened in the last year, of course, was delayed due to COVID-19. So this will be an opportunity in the coming year to do these changes as you propose.
Okay, so that develop 4 to 6 high quality performance measures, that covers that aspect, does it?
That was from the President's Statement of Intent, and our comment for the preparation of next year's is that we note the new performance measures with council staff was delayed, and that in addition to completing that work, the activities should also now include some new measures that have come out of the arts chapter of the Arts and Heritage Plan.
Okay. I did see that. It just wasn't clear to me that that related to the MOU and the percentages and stuff. But that will no doubt come through when the draft comes through. We'll see that then, will we?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And just to follow up on that, the same measure for the Regent, I think, came out of the discussion earlier about rather than their target being numbers of people, right, it'd be useful to have that expressed as percentage of capacity, which might give us more useful reporting through this period. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Gillian and Steph. Question across really all of these, and you will no doubt recall in the last term of council, we sort of began a focus of ensuring that our CCOs had clear signals around environmental sustainability coming into their planning and activities. It seems to me on reading these pieces of draft correspondence to go out that we're sort of taking more of a broad lens, I suppose I'd say, around that, in terms of saying you have a role to play in the strategic direction and listing all those areas of strategic endeavor. And so I guess the question that I have is, given that it took some time, I think, to bring the CCO's organizational focus into that environmental sustainability space, are you confident that the approach that we're taking here is going to be sufficient to maintain a level of focus there that will see them continue progressing?
Yes, I believe so. And you'll notice in the comments for each of the SOEs that under Outline Approach to Good Governance Practices, Financial Sustainability and Environmental Sustainability, we have put a comment, develop performance measure of contribution to environmental sustainability in each of the Statement of Expectations. Right. So they will be required to develop a performance measure.
Great, excellent. Thank you for that confirmation, Madam Chair. Thank you.
No further questions, ladies. So we will move to the recommendation that Council approve the statements of expectation for Te Manawa Museums Trust, Regent Theatre Trust as amended, Globe Theatre Trust, attachments 1 to 3 of memorandum titled Statements of Expectation for Cultural Council Controlled Organisations 2022-2023, presented to the Arts, Culture and Heritage Committee on 17 November 2021 as the basis for the Statements of Intent 2022-2025. I will move that, seconded by Councillor Barrett. Open for any comments. There being none, ask you to vote. carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 16 on our order paper is a report on future plans for celebration of Waitangi Day and Matariki public holidays in Papaioia, Palmerston North, presented by Luke McIndoe, Head of Events. Welcome, Luke. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I take the report as read and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Luke, because reading it would not take very long at all, would it? So, would you like to explain why the report is so short?
Mainly because the events are in planning. We've resolved to make sure that events are happening. They are now in the planning stages with iwi representatives. The partnership is continuing to progress and planning is well and truly underway, especially for the first of the events, the Waitangi Day event. And under the current environment, we can't plan too far ahead at this stage.
Okay. So, how far ahead is not too far ahead? Because Waitangi Day isn't all that far away. So, is there a plan for a public event for Waitangi Day?
There is, and we are watching the government's guidance very closely, and that will guide where we go with that event.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Further, and in particular to Waitangi Day, I guess first to Luke acknowledge that there is uncertainty. If things go well from a COVID and public health point of view, how would you compare what you're hoping to see in 2022 relative to what we saw in 2021?
It'll be very, very different. Through the engagement with iwi, aspirations for this event will focus around the partnership element, and it's looking to move it into a new space, a culturally significant space for iwi and the city, and that as well will help with some of the guidance, some of the restrictions we're expecting with the new framework that's coming through from government.
Thank you, and just thinking about it from a community awareness and sort of comms lens, if there is going to be a change relative to last year, is there going to be some communication to help members of the public understand that what was experienced in 2021 might be different in 2022?
Yeah, there will be, yes.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Luke. This is a bit of a teaser, isn't it? Are you able to give us any more details about what's planned?
A little bit. In discussions with iwi, there is an aspiration to move it to the awa. So we're currently looking at the site that Matariki was held last year down at the Tini Whitu Ki Te Rangi installation down at the end of Albert Street there. So that's the first big change we're looking at.
And are we planning some kind of more than just a ceremony? Is it going to be a kind of a longer event for the public and that type of thing?
Absolutely. Yeah. So strong focus on family and focus on that partnership.
Okay. All right, thank you. And what about the Matariki?
Not much is planned on that at this stage, but there is we're committing to deliver an event in partnership with iwi.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had two questions, but my first was around location, and you've given some indication around what's being considered, which sounds really exciting. So my next question then is, in regards to the planning, I mean, you've made a comment in your report around we're working in partnership with Rangitane, and my understanding in terms of the practical side of the planning has been that we've sort of left that to iwi to then let us know what the plan is. I'm just trying to understand around the practicalities of who is taking the lead with that partnership. Are we doing a bit more of the logistics with organising in consultation with iwi to ensure that they're on board, or are they doing more of the logistics around the actual planning?
A bit of both. So we are coming in with our event management experience and working with ideas from iwi to make sure the event that is put on meets their aims as well as our aims and health and safety requirements and the quality we expect from a public-facing event. So after the Matariki event, we've learnt from that experience, and that guides our planning going forward into the next two this year.
Okay, so in terms of skills, expertise, resource, we are putting a little bit more into the event planning side of it with our staff who have got experience in that space than we have in the last year or two. Is that a fair comment from what you've just said? That we'll be a little bit more active with coordination?
The biggest change is the relationship between the officers and the iwi representatives, and current the way it's currently tracking is that relationship's a lot tighter, and we're working, along the same path this time to deliver together rather than separating out and doing our own thing and having different aims for the outcome.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, Madam Chair, the Deputy Mayor asked pretty well the questions, and I think Luke's explained that the delivery's coming from the officers. Thanks.
Thank you. Then that concludes questions. Thank you, Luke. The recommendation of the committee resolved that the memorandum titled Report on Future Plans for Celebration of Waitangi Day and Matariki Public Holidays in Papaioia, Palmerston North, presented to the Arts, Culture and Heritage Committee on 17 November 2021 be received for information, which I will move, seconded by Councillor Barrett. Open for any comments. Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm actually quite excited by this very slim report. I know that Waitangi Day and Matariki actually mean different things to different people, and I am super excited that we are working in partnership with Rangatane to figure out what their aspirations are of this event and kind of moving forward in that direction, because, I have heard comments from general public that that sometimes it feels unfair for Māori to be working kind of during these kind of events. So, that is just one sentiment that I've heard from the public. So being able to actually work in genuine partnership with Rangatane, figuring out what it is that they want and working with how we usually do things, I think is a positive step forward. So I say well done, and I look forward to whatever happens next.
Thank you. Yes, I am also excited by the super slim report. And for similar reasons to Councillor Dingwall, I'm excited that we get to express our aspirations for our community through these events. Excited that we're working in partnership in a real and meaningful way to deliver something that meets our community aspirations. But I want to be really clear that I do have aspirations for actual events to happen. I don't see, just for the avoidance of doubt, an event in my book is not just raising a flag. So that's my aspiration. I would like to see it reflected in whatever we do in partnership with our iwi in delivering these important events for our community. And that's all I want to say about that. So let's vote on the recommendation in front of us. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 17 on the report, on the order paper, losing my words, is the report on feasibility and process for establishing a heritage advisory panel presented by David Murphy, Chief Planning Officer. So David will make the long walk from the back benches to present his report. Thank you, David.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll do a little bit more than take it as read, but it won't be at the end of it won't be a PowerPoint presentation, so something in between, just a few points I'd like to emphasise. The first one is that I guess the recommendation was to report back on feasibility and process as opposed to formally establishing an advisory panel with terms of reference and things like that. I think, you know, the delivery of Council's heritage functions it has been largely unchanged for a long period of time. However, that's not to say that there hasn't been some good step change in areas in recent times. So we've had the military heritage focus. We've had increases to the Heritage Fund and the earthquake-prone building support package, which has been positive. We've seen the work from the library in more recent times around the online resources and Manawatu heritage and those sorts of things. Ultimately, the delivery of any function is linked to the resources that are made available to officers, and from my experience, any advisory panel, steering group or reference group established by the council creates work. That's the reality when these things are established. So I talk a little bit about the difference between an advisory panel, reference group and steering group, and I think we use those terms a little bit interchangeable, and ultimately I think if we go down the path of an advisory panel, that the key thing is the terms of reference, as I'm sure councillors will appreciate. There's some commentary around the fact that if we do go with an advisory panel, thinking carefully about whether that's an expert panel where we're including architectural conservators, architects, urban designers, or more community-based experts. Bearing in mind that some of those community-based experts are experts in their own right in terms of sort of self-established, or there's a hybrid type model. So I have suggested if the panel was established, resourcing would look something like, I think, a heritage planner, a consultancy budget for some research, potentially like a placeholder capital program, because the expectation, I think, based on our experience from the military heritage, is that those research and themes that are brought forward are then physically demonstrated through projects in the city. And obviously, I don't want to repeat the recommendations, but if we proceed with the panel, then there's some suggestions in the recommendations about how that is established. And I think if a program is prepared, then I think the council is best to determine whether that's through an annual budget or a 10-year plan and the timing of that. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, David. I will open for questions. And I do have a couple to start with, and I'll just express my intention to move the second of the two recommendations on screen there when we get to that stage. So, David, the genesis of this idea came from a training event that the Mayor and I attended, where a member of the Auckland Heritage Advisory Panel spoke very compellingly about the benefits their community had realised by having a panel. And you've included that in your list of panels in other parts of New Zealand. I wonder if you had a view on which of those panels was most effective or most likely to be a useful model for Palmerston North?
I mean, if it's more of an expert type panel, then one of the things we need to bear in mind is sometimes those experts will expect to be paid. So if you were to put, and I think also bearing in mind the larger metro cities tend to have heritage architects, those sorts of people within their community. So we have heritage experts, but they're more experts who have come through the community or the academic space, such as Margaret that we heard from earlier today, who brings the history. But heritage in itself is quite a broad concept. So there's the history and the storytelling, but then there's the buildings, so urban design architects, planners, heritage architects all have a role. So my sense, given Palmerston North context, I think more of a community-based panel is going to be more effective for us, and that's not in any way disrespecting the expertise that we have in the city. It's probably more that it's going to come from an potentially an academic, volunteer, community-based expert than the types of people you see on a panel in a larger city. So it's difficult, it's a horses for courses thing. I think the Auckland panel probably works well for Auckland because of the expertise that they have in the city. So we have a slightly different set of expertise to potentially pull from within the community. But sorry, it's a long answer, but it's not to say that it's not to say if you wanted to go down that expert route, you couldn't bring in and fund somebody from another part of the country to sit on the panel as an expert.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I suppose understanding what might be a good model for Palmerston North is one thing, but I just noted in your report there, just around Heritage Nelson, said that's recently disestablished. Can we give some more information about that? Like, how long was that an entity within the Nelson city area? And do we know why that failed, or why they decided to disestablish it?
I must admit, one of my team members who's unavailable today completed the research on the different parts of the panels. So I'd have to look into that as to why it was established. And I think the summary we've provided about the different panels, I guess, is just to provide a sense that I don't think there's one right way of doing this. And if you look at what's been done across the country and the examples we've provided, they're all unique in their own way. So I think ultimately we should look to other parts of the country, but ultimately, I guess my advice would be for us to think hard about, if we want to proceed with this, what would work well in Palmerston North. And I think we have, we have the Manawatu Heritage Trust, we have an academic community, we have a community-based group who have really in-depth knowledge and history of the city, but we don't have a city full of, as I said, heritage architects and those sorts of things. So, but we can potentially lean on those people in other ways.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, David. I'm just interested in your assessment of the resourcing that would be required for such a panel. So you've suggested a specialist heritage planner, 0.5 FTE, a consultancy budget to fund research, and potentially a new capital programme to assist with physical representation and narration of heritage themes. So You've commented on the Disability Reference Group, which has been set up recently, but to my understanding, the Disability Reference Group doesn't have any of those resources, but yet still manages to function well as a reference group. It's brought several recommendations up through Community Development Committee about changes that are required. So how is it that you think that level of resourcing would be required for a heritage advisory panel when we don't have it for, say, the Disability Reference Group?
My advice in part is drawn on the experience that we've seen from military heritage as one example of a heritage theme. So I think if a heritage advisory panel was established, it would look at developing research in heritage themes across the city, across more than one theme. So if we look at the military heritage theme, we've had to commission some research to better understand the military heritage theme, so that costs money. I don't imagine that the Heritage Advisory Panel would be completing that research itself. It would be helping to scope it and maybe review it and identify the priorities. So there's completing the research, and then I think when we've seen the delivery of that military heritage theme through projects, where there has been large catalyst type projects, we've been able to incorporate that, for instance, at the arena. But some of the expectations that come from these sorts of steering groups and advisory groups tends to typically be over and above what can be delivered through existing budgets. So if we look at Cuba Street, there's been a constant request to ensure that there is military heritage themes delivered through that, but delivering those within existing budgets is typically proven to be problematic. So I think when you think about an advisory panel that might look at over time developing potentially 5 or 6 heritage themes, that is all going to raise expectations, require work, and require resourcing.
So maybe I should be putting in for this level of resourcing for the community committees as well then? Is that your suggestion?
I can't comment on that. My advice is based on the resource, and I think that would be required to support a heritage advisory panel based on, and each work is different in its own right, I guess.
I think you can
know,
stop digging there, David. She doesn't need an answer to that one. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, David, for quite a comprehensive report, actually. I think it probably has been answered in some of your commentary, but so we've got, like, I don't know, about 7 or 8 different heritage-type trusts. Do you see them all sort of feeding into this overarching heritage advisory group?
Yes, so one of the recommendations was that if a heritage advisory panel is established, that the terms of reference and composition is developed in consultation with the Manawatu Heritage Trust and interested heritage stakeholders. So, you know, we also have the Heritage New Zealand group, there's Rangatane. So ultimately, I think, you know, a heritage advisory panel established by the council would, I think, become almost like the lead agency or group for heritage. So it doesn't mean that those other organisations would stop functioning or existing, but as I said, my advice is that the panel would be, and the terms of reference would be established in consultation with them. So, that, you know.
Well, they're more specific, aren't they? Like defence is defence, Hoffman Kiln, the Regent's the Regent. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, David. I am struggling to understand this a little bit. Are you able to tell me what a heritage advisory panel would offer us that we don't currently get through other avenues, whether it be submission process or existing trusts or groups? Or is it just about a cohesive approach to a view on a particular subject?
I think the benefits you would get from a heritage advisory panel is coordinated leadership.
And is that dependent on the type of advisory group? You've said whether it's more of a professional or a community group.
Yeah, I mean, typically the sort of, I guess, as I said, there's a broad range of professionals that provide advice on heritage-related matters. I think if it's a more community-based group, what you're going to get is a group that brings through an in-depth, an in-depth knowledge of Palmerston North's history, which can then inform council actions and activities going forward. If it's a more professional type panel, I think what you're going to get is people who can advise council about how best you use the information and heritage and history that is there. So whether that's through streetscape design, storytelling, protection of buildings, Rangatane heritage, cultural sites. So it's thinking, I think, like most things, there's information and then there's what you do with that information. I think a more community-based panel is going to give the council better information and guidance about the history and heritage of Palmerston North, but maybe not necessarily what we then do with that with that information.
Okay, and then the Defence Heritage Group, which seemed to be a narrower group to what we're talking about because they've got a defence approach, but a similar makeup by way of a mix of community representatives. What would happen to them? Because it seems that what's being proposed would actually make that group redundant.
Yeah, I guess it's not for me to say what would happen to that group. Presumably they'd be one of the stakeholders that we would engage with if we made a decision to proceed with the Heritage Advisory Panel. I think if they were to have a sense that military heritage was going to continue to be a theme that the advisory panel prioritised and looked at, then I'd imagine they may be happy to step aside, but or let the panel lead, advisory panel lead on that matter. But that would be, I think there would have to be a conversation between, I forget the acronym. The Heritage that would have to be a conversation between the Defence Heritage Advisory Group and the advisory panel or council during the establishment of the terms of reference, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, David. I come at this from, I guess, a point of view not sure how widely shared, but thinking about heritage from a natural and built context. And looking at page 231, certainly the direction given in March, thinking especially about the aspects of shared heritage with Rangitane, one could easily envisage natural components to that. The report in front of us zooms quite heavily into the built environment and things related more specifically to that. Just wondered if you could provide any, I guess, context around that in terms of, are we moving in a direction that would be exclusive of natural, or is that a yet to be determined if we go down this track?
There was certainly no intention in preparing the report to limit the conversation or the report to built heritage. So I think that if you've obtained that impression from the report, it may well be that in reference to a number of the other panels and groups established across the country tend to focus on that. That's not to say that we would need to do that. As I've said in the recommendation, I think it would be important that Rangitane had representation on the panel and were part of the terms of reference. But I agree, heritage, if you look at the definition of heritage in key legislation, RMA, it is actually very all-encompassing around natural and built heritage. So it would be important that that came through in the terms of reference and composition of any panel.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My questions kind of are very similar to Councillor Barrett's around how I think when I look at heritage, I do strongly would like to see more of the Rangitane history and heritage kind of, I guess, championed a bit more. Would an advisory group help more with that side of things if you'd had you know, Rangitane representation? I guess what I'm saying is one of our actions that we've got in the Arts and Heritage Plan was working with mana whenua to tell their stories and develop a partnership to look after Tonga, and I see Tonga as being kind of everything, really. So when you have that as an already existing action, how does that compare with having an advisory panel with Rangitane representation?
Yeah, so we've made good gains in that space of working with Rangitane in terms of you know, better representing their history physically through the activities of council, and my expectation is that would continue regardless of whether an advisory panel is established. But if an advisory panel is established, then the very firm recommendation is that Rangitane are part of the panel and part of the preparation of the terms of reference to ensure that their aspirations are represented through the work of the panel. So, as I said, you know, potentially, you know, the key benefit is coordinated leadership. And Rangitane would be part of that, but it's the good work that's been happening would continue, I think, regardless.
Have we asked them how they want to be, how they want their stories to be told? In terms of, like, have we mentioned this to them at all? Do we have any gauge on whether they would want to be part of a heritage advisory panel?
Well, the recommendation was to report back on feasibility and process, and the recommendation talked about our shared Rangitane and European heritage, so there was an inherent assumption in the recommendation that Rangitane were to be part of this work going forward, and that's reflected in the recommendations, but there's been no explicit conversation. Obviously, if the next step would be, if the council wanted to proceed, we would engage with Rangitane.
Cool, thank you.
And Councillor Hancock's popped back in there.
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you. Sorry to come back on the queue again. I'm just looking at sort of the second recommendation there. I'm not sure whether now is the right time to ask this, but in terms of that second recommendation, is there a kind of a stop-go point in that in terms of, like, it just kind of sort of drifts us towards, I suppose, preparing a program to establish a heritage advisory panel. and it kind of sort of drifts us into an annual budget, long-term plan kind of sort of point. So is there a point in terms of that recommendation that we might get to where it's either a stop-go decision point?
If you wanted to consider a program as part of the consideration of the 2022-23 annual budget, then that program would have to be prepared between now and Christmas. And I think we are reporting the annual budget for consideration, I think, mid-February. So that's the sort of time frame. As I said, we've done some preliminary thinking, but if it was to be considered, as I said, part of the upcoming annual budget, then we'd need to do the work between now and Christmas.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't think we've actually sort of answered the question, because I guess this is all sort of under a header of feasibility and process of establishing a heritage advisory panel, and then the second recommendation actually doesn't talk about the feasibility anymore. It actually just talks about the establishment thereof, and that sort of gets consumed in the annual budget and long-term plan process.
Oh, sorry, I misinterpreted your question. Sorry, I was looking at the or rather than. Sorry, I was looking at the or rather than the second recommendation. So the second recommendation is probably, you can interpret more of a heads up that if the council proceeds to with the preparation of a heritage advisory panel, I guess I've given you an indication of the nature of the advice that would be coming to council around the terms of reference. So the stuff in recommend 2 has been noted. So if you proceeded, as I said, with the directed staff to prepare a terms of reference for an advisory panel, then we're suggesting those are the things that would follow in recommendation 2, as opposed to the second part of recommendation 1. Does that make sense?
Okay, yes. David, we think what the question is, when do we get to say yes or no to this going ahead?
Well, I think that if the committee today want to proceed with the second part of recommendation 1, is that the Chief Executive be directed to prepare a program to establish the panel as part of. So that's the first decision you need to make, and then if you make that decision, which is the second part of recommendation 1, you then would need to probably amend it to say, as part of the 22-23 annual budget, or the 24 LTP, or year 3 of the annual budget.
And so following on from that, what would be a feasible target?
Well, we've effectively done the work. Like if the council wanted a program to be considered as part of the upcoming annual budget, it would effectively be taking the contents of this report and turn it into a program.
Okay. Thank you. So, everybody looking like this is 4:30, what on earth is going on? Councillor Dennison, you have a question? You're in the queue to comment. You have rather jumped the gun. Deputy Mayor, is that a question, or are you also?
It's a question, thank you.
Excellent.
So to be really clear, the recommendation essentially is to either refer this to the annual budget or not refer it to the annual budget. And the annual budget is the time in which we would actually consider whether this is going ahead.
Yes, and as I said in the earlier notes, I thought it was an elected member's decision as to whether you wanted to, if you wanted to establish or consider a program, it was ultimately an elected member's decision as to whether you wanted to do this as part of the upcoming annual budget or some future long-term plan.
Right.
So then, to be really clear, you would also be seeking clarification around whether elected members wanted this to go to the annual budget or the long-term plan. That would need to be done now. So when the recommendation is moved, we would be specific around that.
The next annual budget.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
I'll speed this up. I look to move the second part of number 1 there, around the future 2022 annual budget, and cross out long-term plan if somebody wants to second
Happy to
it.
second that, Mr. Mayor. Excellent work, thank you. So we're moving the second option there, that the Chief Executive is directed to prepare a programme to establish a Heritage Advisory Panel to be considered as part of not the future, 2022 annual budget, take out long-term plan. Righto, that's what we're moving. That will get caught up. That sits with the second recommendation, which has 3 bullet points, setting out the background to that. That is the end of questions. Thank you, David. Appreciate that. And we will open for any comments. Mr. Mayor, as the mover, would you like to kick off the comments?
Madam Chair, sorry to interrupt, but the first bit needs to be taken off?
Yes, they're getting there.
Okay, well, just so we're clear.
And also look to move number 2 as well.
Yes, so moving the second half of number 1 and all of number 2. Comments, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking at the time. Look, thank you, David. Thanks for the report. I mean, this has been something that has been brewing for a while, councillors. And for some of the newer members, I totally get the questions about Orangatane involved. Absolutely, they're involved. They've got a great heritage here, and that story is being more and more better told, and this will only enhance that. The natural side, just have to look down the road at Te Apiti and the stuff that we're doing in the river. You know, the evidence of doing this sort of work is an example would be one of our comments today about a building facing Te Maraeohine. That's the reason we've got to do this work, so we don't get into that sort of situation where we're all clambering to try and save a piece of our heritage. All these other entities feed into it. I think that Mr. Murphy said, you know, I think I wrote down here, horses for courses. Palmerston North is probably not a total volunteer aspect of a panel, but we would have some really experienced and talented volunteers like the Margaret Tennants of the world, but also we could have the odd professional practitioner involved. And as Mr. Murphy said, you can bring them in to give us some more experience. I have been through this so many times with different groups, different people that come to see us, and this will be good for us. It really will give us make us more solid in this area, and I just feel we've been missing this for quite a number of years. So please, I hope you can support it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yep, I will echo those comments. I think we attended a heritage training event where it became blindingly obvious that we don't know how lucky we are in Palmerston North, that we have stories that we could tell better than we're currently telling. I think it's quite fitting that we consider this at the end of Local History Week, where we do our best to tell our stories in some very innovative ways, and noting in the report the strength that we have inside council, in our council officers who deliver in this space, you know, in the business as usual programmes that David referred to in his questions. And I particularly want to draw attention to the work of our library teams and our heritage team within the library in this space. They do absolutely stellar work, which is recognised well nationally, and particularly around our archives, the quality of our archives, and Manawatu Heritage, which is doing some great work. So for me, the point of this isn't to reinvent the wheel. It's to provide a lead agency that decides how we tell our stories and to who, and get some hierarchy around that. At the moment, some voices are heard much more clearly than others, and there are stories that don't get told. And this will be a way of addressing that issue. In the last long-term plan, we had a heritage group that met to consider, to receive a presentation around the long-term plan and consider their feedback from that aspect. That room was full of people who were very qualified to comment on this kind of thing. And I think we would be well served by an advisory panel in this regard. And the terms of recommendation, terms of reference would set our expectations for the outcomes of that panel. But obviously all of these things go through a budget round. We all know what happens when we sit down with the dollars in front of us. And so referring it to that process is an appropriate next step. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy that we're moving this item forward. I think ultimately it's still got to be considered in the long-term plan. But if we're going to mark 150 years, you know, this is not a bad way to do it, to actually put a reference group to kind of give some focus on our heritage. We heard the officer say that we struggle to put some of the military aspects into the plans for Cuba Street because we haven't allocated any additional budget. And I think ultimately we've got to expect that if we want to do this and do it well, we need to put some additional budget in place. So I think that's also a heads up. So if we're going to put something like this in place, let's also support it with some budget resource. And as far as the membership of the panel, that seems reasonable to me, and I guess it's going to develop over time, but I'm very comfortable to kind of move this along and put this in place for consideration next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson?
Yes, very supportive of setting this up. I mean, I think we've reached a point now where we need to kind of step up our heritage game, and I see that this is a way of doing it. We've achieved a lot on individual projects, but we haven't, I feel, had a kind of a holistic view of the whole. You know, Arena is a really good example where there's lots of heritage built in. We hear about defence heritage, but there's so much more really that we barely touch on. And I think that there's a wealth of experience and knowledge in the community. I mean, I was just thinking of the feedback that we got around the Keisha Birch decision, where there were lots and lots of people who stepped forward to talk about the value of that heritage building, and really, you know, I felt kind of expressing a wider interest in making sure that heritage in the city was protected. So I think we can take advantage of that enthusiasm and passion. And I agree with Councillor Dennison. In the year that we're doing the 150th recognition, then this is a very nice way to finish it off. So, very good.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, do you need a right of reply?
Yeah, I think we're all heading in the right direction. I hope so. Look, this group or panel really does pull everything heritage together. You know, whether it be built, natural, Rangatane, European, every sector basically. And look, there's a quote, you know, and Margaret Tennant said it to me the other day. To know where you want to head in the future, one must understand their past. So if you're thinking about that, you know, we have a really unique city story to tell, and I think this panel will help unlock some of those stories. So please do support this. Thank you.
And so we will look to vote.
Are we doing both together?
Yes.
Yep.
Carried unanimously. Thank you all. Last item on the order of business for today, item 18, is our committee work schedule. Look to the General Manager. Any comment you wanted to make there, Chris? Chris would not like to comment. He thinks we've done quite enough talking for today. Any questions? Are there any questions before I move this? No questions. I will move that Arts, Culture and Heritage Committee receive the work schedule dated November 2021, seconded by Councillor Barrett. Any comments? Councillor Dennison.
I just having a better look at the work schedule, and I know the residents and artists and residents scheme, that there was a limitation on the accommodation currently, and see that it's not due for August next year, well into next year. So if it's not too late for a question, just whether or not that report can come earlier, is that, what are the options that we've navigated to
I can
get
probably
that addressed?
speak to that for you, Councillor Dennison. We discussed it at the agenda meeting. The accommodation issues for the artists and residents have been resolved.
Okay.
There is no changes planned to that from where we currently sit. And the focus of this report is more about strategic partnership and future direction. Current work pressures meant it was unlikely to be delivered for April, so we've gone with the certainty option of asking for it to be delivered in August, but with a very clear understanding that August is when it will be delivered.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that update of
No,
the
that
current
is
status.
the
Thanks.
update. Any other questions? Then let's vote on the work schedule. Carried unanimously. Nō reira, na mihi nui kia koutou, e nā mana, e nā reo. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Concluding the meeting.